Clara Reeves stood on her porch in Crimson Ridge, heart pounding as the stagecoach rolled to a stop. She'd advertised for a mail-order husband. A simple arrangement, a fresh start. But when the door swung open and James Maddox stepped out, the gunslinger who'd saved her life 2 years ago before vanishing into legend, her world shattered. He was supposed to be dead. He was supposed to be forgotten. Now he stood before her as the man she'd promised to marry, and somewhere in the desert, the brother of the outlaw he'd killed was hunting him down. Stay with me until the end of this frontier tale of revenge, redemption, and impossible love. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The Oklahoma Territory sun beat down mercilessly on Clara Reeves's weathered porch, turning the wood beneath her boots into something that felt like it might combust at any moment. She'd been standing there for the better part of an hour, watching the horizon where the stage road cut through red clay and scrub brush, her hands twisted in the folds of her calico dress until the fabric threatened to tear. 28 months. That's how long it had been since she'd placed that advertisement in the territorial newspaper, her hand shaking so badly the ink had smeared across the page. Widow seeks husband. Must be honest, hardworking, and willing to build a life on the frontier. No drunkards or gamblers. Write to Clara Reeves, Crimson Ridge, Oklahoma Territory. The responses had been few. Most men who came west were looking for gold or adventure, not the hard reality of farming impossible land and building a home from nothing but determination and prayer. She'd written back to exactly one man, a fellow who called himself John Rivers, whose letters had been brief but kind, practical without being cold. He'd lost his wife to cholera. She'd lost her husband to a rattlesnake bite that had turned gangrenous before the circuit doctor could arrive. They were two people who understood loss and were ready to build something new from the ashes of their grief. That's what she'd told herself anyway, in the long nights when the coyotes howled and the emptiness of her cabin pressed down like a physical weight. Now the stagecoach was cresting the final hill, dust billowing behind it in golden clouds that caught the afternoon light. Clara's neighbor, Martha Hendricks, had come to stand beside her, a small woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "You're shaking like a leaf in a tornado," Martha observed, not unkindly. "He's just a man, Clara. You've survived worse than a mail-order husband." Clara managed a weak laugh.
"Have I, though?"
"You survived that coach attack 2 years back when those outlaws left everyone else dead in the dirt. You survived losing Henry. You survived another winter alone in that cabin with nothing but your stubbornness and my husband's charity keeping you fed. Yes, Clara, you've survived worse." The stage was close enough now that Clara could hear the thunder of hooves, the creak of leather and wood, the driver's shout as he urged the team forward for the final stretch. Her heart climbed into her throat and lodged there, making it hard to breathe. What if he wasn't what his letters suggested? What if he took one look at her, too thin, too worn, too marked by hardship, and climbed right back on that stage? What if? The coach rolled to a stop in front of the general store across the dusty main street. The driver, old Tom Cassidy, set the brake and climbed down with the stiffness of a man who'd spent too many years on a hard bench. He opened the door with a flourish, stepping back to let the passengers disembark. A woman emerged first, clutching a crying baby to her chest. Then a traveling salesman with a case of patent medicines. Then a young couple who looked barely old enough to be married, holding hands and gazing at each other with nauseating devotion. Then nothing. Clara's stomach dropped. Had he changed his mind? Had he gotten off at an earlier stop? Had this all been some cruel... The coach shifted on its springs as someone else moved inside. A hand appeared on the doorframe, scarred, strong, with long fingers that Clara recognized even before the rest of him came into view. Time stopped. The man who stepped down from that stagecoach was taller than she remembered, broader in the shoulders, his face more lined by sun and hard living. He wore trail-dusted black, a gun belt riding low on his hips in the practiced way of someone who'd lived by violence. His hat shadowed features that had haunted her dreams for 2 years. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked carved from stone, and eyes the color of winter storms. James Maddox, the gunslinger who'd saved her life. The man who'd carried her through fire and death. The ghost who'd vanished into legend before she could even thank him. He was supposed to be dead. Everyone said so. The territorial marshal had posted notices. James Maddox, wanted for the murder of Cole Garrett in the aftermath of a stagecoach robbery. Reward $500. Approach with extreme caution. But here he stood, 20 feet away, his gaze sweeping the street with the practiced wariness of a man who expected trouble in every shadow. His eyes passed over her once, dismissively, then snapped back as recognition hit him like a physical blow. She watched the color drain from his face, watched his hand drift toward his gun before he caught himself, watched his lips form her name, though no sound emerged. Clara's legs forgot how to hold her weight. If Martha hadn't grabbed her arm, she would have collapsed right there on the porch. "Clara?" Martha's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong? Do you know that man?" Did she know him? She knew the feel of his arms carrying her when her own legs couldn't hold her. She knew the sound of his voice, rough and urgent, telling her to stay awake, to keep breathing, to hold on just a little longer. She knew the weight of his coat, wrapped around her shoulders as they huddled in a cave while her world burned behind them. She knew him the way you know someone who's seen you at your most broken and hasn't looked away. "He can't be," Clara whispered. "He can't be my mail-order husband." But James Maddox was walking toward her now, his boots kicking up dust with each step, his expression a mixture of shock and something that might have been resignation or might have been relief. He stopped at the base of her porch steps, looking up at her with those storm-gray eyes that had been the last thing she'd seen before consciousness fled 2 years ago. "Miss Reeves," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered, gravel and smoke and dark promises. "I believe we have some things to discuss." The silence that followed was so profound that Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could hear Martha's quick intake of breath, could hear the stage driver haggling with the salesman over luggage fees half a block away. "You know each other?" Martha asked, her grip on Clara's arm tightening. James's gaze never left Clara's face. "We met, once, a long time ago." 2 years, Clara managed, her voice sounding strange and distant to her own ears. "The Lawton stage." Martha's sharp gasp confirmed she'd heard the stories. Everyone in the territory had. 5 passengers, a driver, and a guard, all dead except for one woman who'd been found 3 days later by a search party, half mad with thirst and exposure, raving about a dark-haired man who'd killed the attackers and carried her to safety before disappearing like smoke. Most people thought the trauma had fractured her mind, that she'd invented the mysterious savior to cope with the horror of watching everyone around her die. But Martha had believed her. Martha had sat with her through the nightmares, had held her when she woke screaming, had never once suggested the man was a fever dream. "Sweet Jesus," Martha breathed. "You're him. You're the one who—" "We should talk inside," James interrupted, his eyes scanning the street again. "Somewhere private." Clara wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to get back on that stage and ride out of her life as thoroughly as he'd ridden into it, but she'd seen that wariness before, had learned to read the tension in his shoulders that said danger was close. "My cabin," she said, "half a mile north." "I'll come too," Martha announced in a tone that brooked no argument. "Samuel can manage the store for an hour." James hesitated, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. He retrieved a worn saddlebag from the stage driver, paid the man, and fell into step beside Clara and Martha as they walked up the dusty street toward the northern edge of town. Clara was acutely aware of every eye on them. Crimson Ridge was too small for a stranger to go unnoticed, especially one who moved like James did, like violence contained, like thunder before the storm. By sunset, everyone would know that Clara Reeves's mail-order husband had arrived. By tomorrow, they'd be asking questions she didn't know how to answer. The walk to her cabin felt eternal. Clara kept her eyes forward, her spine rigid, refusing to look at the man beside her even though every nerve in her body screamed awareness of his presence. He was too close. The heat of him, the scent of trail dust and leather, and something darker, gunpowder maybe, or old blood, made her dizzy. Her cabin appeared ahead, small and weathered but sturdy, with the barn she'd built with her own hands standing behind it. Chickens scattered as they approached. The milk cow, Bessie, lifted her head from grazing and mooed a question. "Practical," James observed, and there was approval in his voice that made something in Clara's chest twist painfully. She'd built this place from nothing, from grief and determination and the bone-deep need to prove she could survive alone. And now this ghost from her past was walking into it, tracking dust and danger and memories she'd tried so hard to bury. Martha went straight to the stove without being asked, starting a fire and filling the coffee pot with the easy familiarity of someone who'd done it 100 times before. Clara gestured James toward the rough-hewn table, Henry's last project before he died, the wood still showing the marks of his careful hands. James set his saddlebag down but didn't sit. Instead, he moved to the window, his back to the wall, positioned so he could see both the door and the window simultaneously. "You're expecting trouble," Clara said flatly. "I'm always expecting trouble." His eyes met hers, and something in their depths made her breath catch. "But yes, specific trouble, the kind that's been following me for 2 years. Martha set 3 tin cups on the table with more force than necessary. "Then maybe you'd better start explaining, Mr. Maddox. Because if you've brought danger to Clara's door after everything she's been through—" "I didn't know it was her," James said quietly. "The letters were signed Clara Reeves. 2 years ago, you told me your name was Clara Montgomery." Clara flinched. "Montgomery was my maiden name. I used it then because Henry and I weren't—" She stopped, unwilling to speak her personal business in front of him. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you answered my advertisement under a false name." "John Rivers," he acknowledged. "I needed a name that wasn't attached to a wanted poster." "You're wanted?" Martha's hand drifted toward the rolling pin hanging on the wall, a gesture that would have been comical if the situation weren't so dire. "For murder," James said bluntly. "Though the man I killed deserved worse than a bullet." The coffee began to boil, filling the cabin with its bitter aroma. Clara moved mechanically, pouring it into the cups, her hands somehow steady despite the chaos in her head. She set 1 cup in front of James, another in front of Martha, and wrapped her own hands around the third, letting the heat ground her. "Tell me," she said. "All of it, starting with that night." James was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless, as if he were reciting someone else's story. "I was riding guard on the Lawton stage, extra gun for hire, no questions asked. The company didn't care that I had a past, just that I could shoot straight." He took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the heat. 3 hours out of Lawton, we were hit. 6 riders, coordinated ambush. They killed the driver first, then the official guard. Systematic, professional. Clara closed her eyes, but the images came anyway. Blood spraying, screams cut short, the terrible sounds of bullets tearing through flesh. The man leading them was Cole Garrett. I knew him by reputation, vicious, cruel, the kind who killed for pleasure as much as profit. He wanted everyone dead, no witnesses. James's voice hardened. He shot the couple in the forward seat first, then the banker, then the old woman who'd been knitting the whole ride. "There was another woman," Clara whispered. "Young, pregnant." "I shot the man aiming at her," James said. "But I was too slow. He got the shot off first. She was dead before she hit the ground." He paused, his jaw working. "Cole turned his gun on you next. You were frozen, staring at the bodies like you couldn't process what you were seeing. I killed 3 of his men in quick succession, but Cole managed to shoot the pregnant woman's husband before I got him in the shoulder." Clara remembered the sound of gunfire, the smell of blood and powder smoke, the terrible weight of the woman who'd collapsed against her, already gone. "Cole ran," James continued. "Him and his 2 remaining men. They took the strongbox and left us there. Me, you, and corpses." He met Clara's eyes. "You were in shock. Couldn't talk, couldn't walk. I got you on a horse and rode for high ground before they could regroup." "The cave," Clara said. "I remember a cave, fire. You telling me stories to keep me awake." Something flickered across James's face, pain maybe, or regret. "You kept trying to sleep. I was afraid if you did, you wouldn't wake up, so I talked. About anything. Everything." He looked away. 3 days until I got you close enough to civilization for someone to find you. Then I left." "Why?" The question burst from Clara before she could stop it. "Why did you save me just to abandon me?" "Because Cole Garrett survived," James said simply. "And he saw my face, knew I'd killed his brother and half his gang. If I'd stayed with you, he would have come for me and you'd have been caught in the crossfire." He set his cup down with careful precision. I tracked him for 6 months. Finally caught up with him in a town called Red Fork. He was drunk, bragging about the Lawton massacre to anyone who'd listen, about the pregnant woman he'd killed, about how he was going to find the bastard who'd shot him and make it last for days. Martha made a small sound of disgust. James ignored it. I called him out. Fair fight, witnesses, everything by the book. He drew first. James's expression was stone. But I shot faster, killed him clean. Then why are you wanted? Clara demanded. Because Cole Garrett had a brother, Lucas Garrett, younger, smarter, and 100 times more dangerous. James's hand curled into a fist on the table. Lucas didn't care that the fight was fair, didn't care that Cole was a murdering bastard who got what he deserved. All he cared about was revenge. He bribed the local marshal, got me declared wanted for murder. Been hunting me ever since. The cabin fell silent except for the crackle of the fire. Clara stared at James, seeing him properly for the first time. Not as a ghost or a memory, but as a man. A tired, hunted man who'd saved her life and paid for it with his freedom. So you answered my advertisement to hide, she said slowly. Under a false name, in a small town where no one would think to look for you. Yes? No apology in his voice, just flat honesty. I needed to disappear, needed to become someone else. John Rivers, simple farmer, mail-order husband. It was a good cover. He paused. I didn't know it was you until I stepped off that stage and saw your face. If I had... What? You wouldn't have come? Clara heard the bitterness in her own voice and hated it. I would have warned you first, James said quietly. Given you the choice. Because Lucas will find me eventually. He always does. And when he comes, anyone close to me becomes a target. Martha had gone pale. You're saying this man might come here? Might hurt Clara to get to you? He's killed families before, James said bluntly. Burned homes, slaughtered livestock. He believes in making examples, in making the punishment fit what he sees as the crime. His eyes found Clara's again. I can leave. Get back on the next stage. Disappear again. It's safer for everyone. Clara should have agreed. Should have sent him away, back into the territory with his danger and his ghosts. Should have protected the life she'd built here. But she thought about the advertisement she'd written, the desperate hope in each word. Thought about the empty cabin and the long winters and the bone-deep loneliness that had driven her to seek out a stranger for companionship. Thought about James's voice in the darkness of that cave, rough and patient, keeping her tethered to life when death would have been easier. No, she heard herself say. You'll stay. Martha made a strangled sound. James's eyebrows rose. Clara, Martha began, you can't be serious. This man is wanted for murder. He's got a killer after him. If you... He saved my life, Clara interrupted, her voice steady now, certain. When every other person on that stage died, he saved me. I owe him a debt I can never repay. She looked at James. Besides, I advertised for a husband. You answered. We made an agreement. An agreement based on lies, James pointed out. An agreement nonetheless. Clara straightened her shoulders. Unless you've changed your mind? Unless John Rivers's letters about wanting a quiet life and a fresh start were also lies? James was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he shook his head. They weren't lies. I do want those things. Want them more than I've wanted anything in years. Then stay. Clara's heart was pounding, but her voice remained calm. Stay and help me work this land. Stay and be John Rivers, the man you wish you could be. And if Lucas Garrett comes looking, we'll face him together. You don't know what you're agreeing to, James said, but there was something in his voice that sounded like hope. I know enough. Clara held out her hand across the table. What do you say, Mr. Maddox? Do we have a deal? His hand was warm and calloused when it closed around hers. The touch sent electricity up her arm, made her breath catch in her throat. This close, she could see the fine scars on his knuckles, the lines around his eyes that spoke of too much sun and too little sleep. We have a deal, Miss Reeves, he said softly, though you might regret it before this is over. I've regretted plenty of things in my life, Claire replied. Somehow I don't think you'll be one of them. Martha threw her hands up in disgust. You're both insane. Absolutely insane. But there was grudging respect in her eyes when she looked at Clara. But if you're determined to go through with this fool plan, you'll do it properly. No living in sin under the guise of a pretend marriage. You'll speak vows before Reverend Thompson, legal and binding, or I'll tell the whole town what's really going on. Clara felt heat climb her cheeks. Martha, we barely know each other. We can't just— You advertised for a mail-order husband, Martha interrupted. That's the whole point, marrying a stranger. Most couples in these arrangements speak their vows the day the man arrives. If anything, waiting more than a day or two would look suspicious. She pinned James with a sharp look. Unless you have objections. James's gaze moved to Clara, something unreadable in his expression. I have no objections to a legal marriage if Miss Reeves agrees. Might even help sell the story if anyone comes looking. John Rivers, simple farmer, devoted husband. It's a better cover than John Rivers, random boarder who happened to show up at the right time. He was right, Clara knew. And yet the thought of marrying this man, this stranger who was also somehow not a stranger, made her feel like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. We'll speak to Reverend Thompson tomorrow, she said before she could lose her nerve. See if he can perform the ceremony this week. Tomorrow's Sunday, Martha pointed out. He'll be busy with services, but you can talk to him after, make arrangements for Monday or Tuesday. Monday. 3 days away. Clara would be married in 3 days to a man she'd met twice, once in blood and once in lies. That's settled then, Martha said with satisfaction. Now, Mr. Maddox, or should I call you Mr. Rivers now? Rivers when anyone else is around, James said. But between the three of us, I'd prefer James. Less chance of forgetting myself if I'm used to the name. James, then. Martha's expression softened slightly. I suppose if Clara trusts you enough to marry you, I can trust you enough to call you by your Christian name. But know this. If you bring harm to her, wanted man or no, I'll shoot you myself, and my aim's better than you'd think. James's lips twitched into what might have been a smile. I don't doubt it, ma'am. Good. Now have you eaten today? Not since breakfast in the last town. Martha turned to Clara. You have bread and cheese? And dried beef? Clara moved toward her small larder, grateful for something practical to do with her hands. I'll make sandwiches. The next hour passed in a strange sort of domesticity. Martha dominated the conversation, asking James careful questions about his farming experience, more than Clara would have expected, his plans for the property, practical and well thought out, and his expectations for married life, appropriately respectful and modern enough not to raise Martha's hackles. Clara listened more than she spoke, studying James when she thought he wasn't looking. He was more than she remembered, more solid, more present, more real than the half-formed ghost of her memories. The way he moved was careful and controlled, nothing wasted. The way he spoke was measured, each word considered before it left his mouth. But there were moments when something else showed through. A wry humor in the corner of his mouth when Martha said something particularly pointed, a flash of what might have been loneliness when he talked about the last 2 years. He'd been running so long, Clara realized, running and alone, with no one to trust and nowhere to rest. The weight of it showed in the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders never fully relaxed, the constant awareness that kept his attention cycling between the door and windows. What must it be like, she wondered, to live like that? To never be safe, never be still, never be home. You'll sleep in the barn tonight, Martha announced as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. At least until after the wedding, propriety must be maintained. James didn't argue, though Clara saw amusement flicker across his face. Of course. I've slept in worse places. I'll bet you have. Martha stood, brushing crumbs from her skirt. Clara, walk me back to town. I want to discuss the arrangements. Clara knew a dismissal when she heard one. She grabbed her shawl and followed Martha out into the cooling evening air, leaving James to familiarize himself with his new, if temporary, accommodations. They were 50 yards from the cabin before Martha spoke. Are you absolutely certain about this? Clara kept walking. No, but I'm doing it anyway. He's dangerous, Clara. You can see it in the way he moves, the way he watches everything. That's a man who's killed more than once. I know. Clara thought about the cave, about James's hands on her shoulders, gentle despite their strength, about his voice in the darkness, patient and steady, pulling her back from the edge. But he's not cruel. And he saved my life when he could have just ridden away. People change. 2 years running from a killer could change anyone. Maybe. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. But I don't think it changed him. I think it just made him more of what he already was. Martha sighed. You always were stubborn. Even as a girl, once you set your mind to something, wild horses couldn't drag you away from it. She was quiet for a moment. If you're going to do this, at least promise me you'll be careful. Don't trust him completely. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I promise. Clara squeezed Martha's hand. Thank you for believing me, for helping. Someone has to keep you from doing something completely foolish. Martha's expression softened. Though I suppose marrying a wanted gunslinger to pay a life debt is exactly the kind of thing you'd do. Your mother would be horrified. My mother thought I was insane for moving to the territory in the first place. Your mother was a sensible woman. But Martha was smiling now, the concern fading into something like reluctant acceptance. All right. I'll talk to Reverend Thompson tomorrow. Make sure he's available Monday. You'll need a dress. I have a dress. You have a work dress and a Sunday dress that's seen better days. You need a proper wedding dress. I'll bring mine tomorrow after church. We're close enough in size that it should fit with minimal alterations. Clara started to protest, then stopped. Martha was right. If they were going to do this, they needed to do it properly. Anything less would raise suspicions. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see if this fool plan of yours actually works. Martha paused at the edge of town. One more thing. If this Lucas Garrett does show up, what will you do? Clara thought about the bodies on that stagecoach, thought about the pregnant woman's face, young and terrified in the moment before the bullet took her, thought about how close she'd come to joining them in death. Whatever I have to, she said quietly. I've survived too much to let some vengeful outlaw destroy what I've built. Martha studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. That's what I needed to hear. She started to walk away, then turned back. He looks at you like you're water, and he's been crossing a desert. Clara's breath caught. What? James, the way he looks at you. Martha's expression was unreadable. Like you're the first good thing he's seen in years. Just be careful with that too. Desperation makes people do foolish things. Then she was gone, disappearing into the growing shadows of Crimson Ridge's main street, leaving Clara alone with the weight of everything that had just been decided. She walked back to her cabin slowly, trying to process the last few hours. This morning she'd been a lonely widow waiting for a stranger who would become her husband in name only, a practical arrangement for survival. Tonight, she had a wanted gunslinger in her barn who already knew her at her most broken, who'd seen her covered in blood and mad with thirst and terror, and who'd chosen to save her anyway. The lamp was lit when she reached the cabin. Through the window, she could see James moving around inside, banking the fire, checking the locks. Practical. Careful. Making himself useful even in a space that wasn't his. Clara stood in the yard for a long moment, looking up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched her nearly die 2 years ago. The same stars that had witnessed Henry's death, her grief, her slow rebuilding of something like a life. What would Henry think of this? Of her marrying a gunslinger to pay a debt? Henry had been practical, but he'd also been kind. He would have understood, she thought, would have approved of her trying to help someone who'd helped her. Or maybe she was just telling herself that to justify the flutter in her stomach when James's eyes met hers, the electricity that had sparked when he'd taken her hand, the way her breath had caught when she'd seen him step down from that stagecoach. You're being a fool, she told herself quietly. He's here because he needs to hide, because you offered him safety, that's all. But her heart didn't believe it. She pushed open the cabin door to find James standing by her bookshelf, studying the spines of her small collection. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. You have good taste, he said, holding up a worn copy of Ivanhoe. This was my mother's favorite. Was? She died when I was 14. He set the book back carefully. Fever. My father followed her within a year, said he couldn't stand the world without her in it. Clara heard the pain beneath the words, old and scarred, but never fully healed. I'm sorry. James shrugged. It was a long time ago. But it's part of why I understand. Why I know what it's like to lose everything and have to build something new from nothing. Is that what you're trying to do? Build something new? I'd like to try. He moved to the door, collecting his saddlebag. But I won't lie to you, Clara. I don't know if I'm capable of staying in one place anymore. I've been moving so long I'm not sure I remember how to be still. Then we'll figure it out together. The words were out before Clara could think about them, impulsive and raw. You saved me when I couldn't save myself. Now it's my turn to help save you. James looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. I'll be in the barn if you need anything. Check the doors before you sleep. I always do. Check them anyway. He left then, disappearing into the darkness beyond her porch. Clara closed the door behind him and did as he'd asked, checking not just the main door but the back door too, and the windows, feeling foolish but doing it anyway. Only when she was lying in her bed, staring up at the familiar shadows on her ceiling, did she let herself acknowledge the truth. She wasn't afraid of Lucas Garrett finding them. She was afraid of what would happen if he didn't. Because once the threat was gone, James would have no reason to stay. Would likely vanish as thoroughly as he had 2 years ago, leaving her with nothing but memories and unanswered questions. 3 days, she whispered to the darkness. 3 days, and I'll be married to a ghost. Outside, Bessie lowed softly. An owl called from the tree by the creek, and in the barn, a lamp burned late into the night as a wanted man tried to remember what it felt like to stop running. Sunday morning dawned cool and clear, the kind of early autumn day that promised warmth by noon but held the memory of night's chill in the air. Clara woke before sunrise, as she always did, her body trained by years of farm work to rise with the roosters. She dressed quickly in the dim light, braided her hair, and went outside to find James already up, standing by the well with his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, splashing water on his face. He straightened when he heard her approach, water dripping from his jaw, his dark hair falling across his forehead. In the soft light of dawn, with his guard momentarily down, he looked younger than she'd realized. 30 at most, though the life he'd lived had carved lines that added years. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "I fed the chickens. Hope that was all right." "More than all right, thank you." Clara moved to the well, drawing water for coffee. "You didn't have to." "Old habits. My father's farm. We were up before dawn every day." He paused, pulling his shirt back on. "I've missed it, the routine, having purpose beyond just staying alive." There was something vulnerable in the admission that made Clara's chest ache. She wanted to say something comforting, something profound, but the moment felt too fragile for words. Instead, she just nodded and headed back to the cabin, acutely aware of him following behind her. They worked together in comfortable silence, Clara starting the fire while James brought in more wood without being asked. She made coffee and fried eggs and thick slices of bread, and they ate at the table while the sun climbed higher and painted the eastern sky in shades of gold and pink. "Martha said she'd come by after church," Clara said, breaking the quiet, "to discuss wedding arrangements with Reverend Thompson." James's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "That's today? You having second thoughts?" "No." He set the fork down carefully. "But I haven't been inside a church in years. Not sure the roof won't cave in when I walk through the door." "I doubt the Lord's that vindictive." Clara sipped her coffee. "Besides, we're not going to service. Just speaking with the Reverend afterward." Still, James looked uncomfortable. A man like me, talking marriage vows before a man of God, seems wrong somehow. "A man like you," Clara repeated slowly. "You mean a man who's killed, or a man who's saved lives?" "Both, neither." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I don't know what I am anymore, Clara. I just know I'm not the kind of man who deserves fresh starts or second chances." Clara set her cup down with enough force to make him look up. "That's not your choice to make. If I'm willing to give you that chance, then you accept it or you leave. But you don't get to decide your own worthiness, not in my house." Something shifted in James's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Clara stood collecting their plates. "Now help me clean up. If we're going to face down a reverend and make wedding plans, I'd prefer to do it on a full stomach with clean dishes." They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm that felt practiced despite its newness. James washed while Clara dried, and when their hands brushed reaching for the same plate, neither pulled away immediately. The touch lingered, warm and electric, before Clara forced herself to step back. "I should change," she said, her voice not quite steady. "Sunday dress." James just nodded, his own expression carefully neutral, and Clara fled to the privacy of her bedroom to try and slow her racing heart. The church bells were ringing when Martha arrived in her husband's wagon, wearing her best dress and a determined expression that Clara had learned meant trouble or triumph, depending on which side of Martha's plans you stood. "Reverend Thompson is expecting us," Martha announced, climbing down without waiting for help. "Samuel saved us seats for the service." "We're attending service?" James asked, looking like he'd just been sentenced to hang. "Of course we're attending service. It's Sunday, and you're about to become a respectable married man. That means church attendance." Martha gave him a look that could have melted steel. "Unless you'd prefer the whole town think you're some heathen Clara picked up from the gutter." "Martha," Clara protested, but James held up a hand. "She's right. If we're selling this story, we do it completely." He straightened his shoulders like a man heading into battle. "Lead the way." The church was small, just a single room with rough-hewn pews and a simple cross on the wall, but it was packed when they arrived. Every head turned as they entered, eyes fixing on James with the undisguised curiosity of people who had little entertainment beyond each other's lives. Clara felt James tense beside her but kept walking, her chin up, her hand light on his arm. They slid into the pew beside Samuel Hendricks, a large man with kind eyes who nodded greeting and said nothing about the stranger his wife was shepherding into their midst. Reverend Thompson was young for a frontier preacher, barely 40, with earnest eyes and a voice that carried. His sermon was about redemption and second chances, about the prodigal son and the father who welcomed him home despite his sins. Clara couldn't tell if it was coincidence or if Martha had somehow arranged it, but she saw James's jaw tighten with each word about forgiveness and grace. When the service ended and the congregation filtered out into the sunshine, Clara found herself surrounded by neighbors eager to meet her intended husband. She introduced James as John Rivers, kept the story simple. They'd corresponded, he'd come west to start fresh. They planned to marry quickly, as was common in mail-order arrangements. Most people seemed satisfied with the explanation. A few of the older women looked skeptical, but they held their tongues. It was the men Clara worried about. She saw them watching James with the wary calculation of people who recognized danger when they saw it, even if they couldn't name its source. "Mr. Rivers." Samuel extended his hand when the crowd had thinned. "Welcome to Crimson Ridge. I run the general store with Martha. You need anything, you let us know." James shook his hand, his grip firm but not challenging. "I appreciate that. And please, call me John." "John it is." Samuel's eyes were shrewd. "You have farming experience?" "My father's place in Missouri. Worked it from the time I could walk until I was 20. "Good land in Missouri. What brings you out to the territories?" It was a test, Clara realized. Samuel's casual tone didn't hide the sharpness beneath the question. "Same thing that brings most men west," James said evenly. "Chance to start over. Build something of my own instead of working land that would never be mine." "Fair enough." Samuel nodded slowly. "Claire's place needs work. Good bones, but it's been just her for 2 years. Hard for anyone alone." "I'm not alone anymore," Clara interjected, slipping her hand into James's before she could think better of it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. Samuel smiled then, genuine and approving. "No, I suppose you're not." He clapped James on the shoulder. "Come by the store tomorrow. I'll set you up with credit until you're settled." "I can pay," James started, but Samuel shook his head. "Man marrying into this community gets credit. That's how we do things here. We take care of our own." The simple acceptance seemed to undo something in James. Clara felt him exhale, felt the tension bleed from his shoulders. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see Martha's prices." Samuel grinned. "Now, I'll leave you ladies to discuss wedding plans while I head home to my Sunday rest." He ambled away, and Martha immediately turned to Reverend Thompson, who'd been waiting patiently by the church door. Reverend, as I mentioned, Clara and Mr. Rivers would like to be married as soon as possible. Reverend Thompson smiled warmly. Miss Reeves, it's good to see you happy. And Mr. Rivers, welcome. He shook James's hand. Mrs. Hendricks mentioned your situation. Mail order arrangements are common enough out here. No shame in it. When were you hoping for the ceremony? Tomorrow, if possible, Martha said before Clara could answer. No point in waiting. Tomorrow. The word hit Clara like a physical blow. She'd known it was coming, but somehow hearing it made it terrifyingly real. Tomorrow would be fine, Reverend Thompson said. Say, 2 o'clock? That gives me time after my Monday visits to the homesteaders. 2 o'clock is perfect, Martha agreed. She turned to Clara. That gives us today to alter the dress and tomorrow morning to make the cabin presentable. The cabin is presentable, Clara protested weakly. The cabin needs flowers and a proper meal prepared for after the ceremony. You'll invite the Hendricks and maybe the Johnsons. Small gathering, respectable. Martha was already mentally planning. Clara could see it in her eyes. Nothing fancy, but proper. James looked between them with something like amusement. Do I get a say in any of this? No, Martha and Clara said in unison. He laughed then, a real laugh that transformed his face, made him look years younger. Fair enough. I'll defer to the experts. They spent the rest of the afternoon at Martha's house. Clara standing patient while Martha pinned and tucked the wedding dress, ivory silk that had yellowed to cream but was still beautiful, still carried the weight of hope and new beginnings. Martha's husband had been a traveling merchant when they'd met, and the dress had come all the way from St. Louis. I wore this the day Samuel and I married, Martha said around a mouthful of pins. 23 years ago. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime at once. You've been happy? Clara asked, then felt foolish for asking something so obvious. But Martha's expression turned thoughtful. Happy enough. We've had hard times. Lost 2 babies before they could draw breath. Nearly lost the store in the panic of 73. But we built something together, Samuel and me. Something worth keeping. She adjusted a seam. That's what marriage is out here, Clara. It's not romance or poetry. It's partnership. 2 people working toward the same goal, keeping each other alive and sane when the world tries to grind you down. Is that what you think James and I will have? Partnership? I think you'll have that or you'll have nothing. Martha met her eyes in the mirror. The question is whether he's capable of staying still long enough to build it. Clara thought about James's restlessness, the way his eyes constantly tracked movement, the tension that never fully left his body. I don't know. Then you'd better find out before tomorrow at 2. Martha tied off a thread. There. Try walking in it. Clara moved carefully, the dress whispering around her ankles. It fit almost perfectly, just a bit long, but Martha had accounted for that. In the mirror, she looked like someone else. Someone younger, less worn, full of possibility instead of just endurance. You're beautiful, Martha said softly. Don't let anyone tell you different. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you for everything. Save your thanks for after the wedding. We're not done yet. They worked until the sun was setting, Martha insisting on pressing the dress and wrapping it carefully, making lists of what needed to be done the next day. By the time Clara headed back to her cabin, her head was spinning with details, and her chest felt tight with anticipation and fear in equal measure. James was on the porch when she arrived, sitting on the steps with a cup of coffee, watching the last light fade from the sky. He stood when he saw her, his expression carefully neutral. How'd it go? We're getting married tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Clara sat beside him, suddenly exhausted. Reverend Thompson's performing the ceremony, Martha's bringing food, we're inviting the Hendricks and the Johnsons. Sounds official. It will be. Legal and binding. She looked at him. Last chance to change your mind. I could say the same to you. James's voice was quiet. You're the one taking the bigger risk here. Am I? Clara turned the question over. You're the one who'll be trapped if Lucas Garrett shows up. Harder to run when you're married. Maybe I'm tired of running. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Clara wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to push, but the moment felt too fragile. I should sleep, she said instead. Tomorrow's going to be long. Clara. James caught her wrist as she stood, his touch gentle. Whatever happens, thank you for giving me this chance. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, at the scars on his knuckles that told stories he'd never share. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we see if we survive it. His laugh was quiet and dark. Fair point. Clara went inside, closed the door, leaned against it until her breathing steadied. Tomorrow she would marry a wanted man. Tomorrow she would tie her life to someone who'd lived by violence and might die by it too. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. John Rivers, wife of a man who didn't exist, partner to a ghost. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt strangely calm, as if some part of her had been waiting for this moment since the day James Maddox had carried her through gunfire and called her back from death. Sleep came easier than expected, and she woke to Monday's dawn with determination in her bones. Martha arrived before breakfast with her arms full of flowers she'd somehow procured, wildflowers and late-blooming roses, probably bullied from every garden in town. She also brought food, so much food that Clara's small table groaned under the weight of it. You didn't have to do all this, Clara protested, but Martha waved her off. Of course I did. You're getting married. That's worth celebrating. She began arranging flowers in every container Clara owned. Where's your groom? Barn. I haven't seen him yet this morning. Go get him. He needs to clean up. Maybe trim that scruff if he has a razor. Can't have you marrying a wild man. Clara found James mucking out Bessie's stall, his shirt off despite the morning chill, sweat gleaming on his back. She stopped in the doorway, momentarily struck by the sight of him, the play of muscle under skin, the old scars that marked his shoulders and ribs like a map of violence survived. He turned, sensing her presence, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw her expression. Morning. Morning. Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Martha says you need to clean up. Wedding's in 6 hours. 6 hours. He set the pitchfork aside, reaching for his shirt. Feels wrong somehow, getting married in a borrowed name. Would you prefer to use Maddox? Let the whole territory know where you are? No. He pulled the shirt on, started buttoning it. But it still feels like I'm lying to you every time someone calls me Rivers. Clara stepped closer, watching his hands work the buttons. Then when we're alone, you're James. In public, you're John. We'll know the truth even if no one else does. His hand stilled. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. She reached up, brushed a piece of straw from his hair without thinking. The gesture was intimate, domestic, and they both froze. Clara, James said softly, and her name on his lips was a question and a prayer and something else she couldn't name. 6 hours, she repeated, stepping back before she did something foolish. Martha's waiting. She fled before he could respond, her heart hammering, and spent the next hours in a blur of preparation. Martha scrubbed the cabin until it gleamed, arranged flowers on every surface, and somehow transformed Clara's simple home into something that looked almost festive. The Johnsons arrived around noon with their 3 children, bringing a cake that was slightly lopsided but smelled like heaven. James had disappeared to clean up somewhere. The creek, Clara guessed, and when he emerged an hour before the ceremony, she almost didn't recognize him. He'd shaved, trimmed his hair, and put on what must have been his only good shirt, white linen, slightly worn but clean. With his face visible, she could see how handsome he actually was. All sharp angles and strong bones, his eyes storm gray in the afternoon light. You clean up nice, Martha observed, giving him an approving once-over. Now go wait outside while Clara gets ready. It's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony. We're already living on borrowed luck, James pointed out, but he went anyway, taking Samuel and Mr. Johnson with him. Clara let Martha and Mrs. Johnson help her into the wedding dress, their hands gentle as they fastened the buttons up her back and arranged her hair. Someone had brought a small mirror, and Clara barely recognized herself in it. She looked young again, hopeful, like a woman who still believed in happy endings. You ready? Martha asked, and Clara nodded even though she wasn't sure. Reverend Thompson arrived exactly at 2, his Bible tucked under his arm, his expression kind. They gathered in Clara's small cabin, Martha and Samuel, the Johnsons, and their children, and James standing by the window looking like he might bolt at any moment. Clara walked to stand beside him, and his eyes widened when he saw her in the dress. Clara, he breathed. You look like I'm getting married, she finished, her voice shaking slightly. Like you're beautiful, he corrected, and the sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. Reverend Thompson cleared his throat. Shall we begin? The ceremony was simple, the words old and familiar. Clara heard herself promise to love and honor, heard James's deep voice echo the same vows. His hand was steady when he took hers, but she felt the calluses, the scars, the evidence of a hard life lived. Do you have a ring? Reverend Thompson asked. James reached into his pocket and produced a simple gold band that looked old, well worn. It was my mother's, he said quietly, sliding it onto Clara's finger. It fit perfectly, warm against her skin. By the power vested in me by the territory of Oklahoma, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Thompson smiled. You may kiss your bride. The kiss was supposed to be brief, perfunctory, for show. But when James's lips met Clara's, something ignited between them, recognition or memory or something deeper that neither had words for. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite his strength, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, just this moment, this impossibility made real. When they finally pulled apart, Martha was crying softly, and even Samuel looked misty-eyed. Congratulations, Reverend Thompson said warmly. May God bless your union. The rest of the afternoon passed in a pleasant blur of food and conversation. The Johnsons' children ran around the yard while the adults ate and talked about crops and weather and the upcoming winter. For a few hours, Clara could almost believe this was real, that she was just a woman who'd married for love, that James was just a farmer, that their biggest worry was whether the wheat would come in before the first frost. But as the sun started to set and their guests began to leave, reality crept back in. James walked Reverend Thompson to his horse, and Clara overheard the Reverend say, You've got good bones in you, Mr. Rivers. I can see it. Whatever you've done before, whatever brought you here, God offers grace to those who seek it. Thank you, Reverend, James said, and he sounded tired. I hope you're right. When everyone had finally gone and it was just the two of them, Clara and James stood in the yard, neither quite sure what to do next. They were married now, legally bound, and the cabin waited behind them with its single bed. I can still sleep in the barn, James offered, reading her mind. We don't have to... this was an arrangement, not... James? Clara cut him off. We're married. You're not sleeping in the barn. Clara, come inside. She held out her hand. Please. He took it after a moment's hesitation, his fingers threading through hers, and followed her into the cabin. Martha had left the lamp burning low, and in its soft light the space looked almost magical, flowers casting gentle shadows on the walls. They stood in the center of the room, still holding hands, neither moving. Then James raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that made her breath catch. I'll try, he said quietly, to be a good husband, to stay, to be worth the chance you're giving me. I know. Clara reached up, touched his face, felt the rough stubble already growing back. We'll figure it out together. That night, they learned each other slowly, carefully, two broken people trying to become something whole. And when Clara fell asleep in James's arms, listening to his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she thought maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Morning came too soon. Clara woke to find James already awake, staring at the ceiling with that distant look she was learning to recognize. She touched his chest, felt him flinch. What is it? I keep waiting, he admitted, for the other boot to drop, for Lucas to appear, for this to end. It won't end, Clara said with more conviction than she felt. We won't let it. But even as she spoke, she heard it. Horses. Multiple horses, riding hard. James was out of bed in an instant, pulling on his pants, grabbing his gun belt. Clara dressed quickly, her heart racing. They reached the porch just as three riders came into view, and Clara's blood turned to ice. The man in the lead was young, perhaps 25, with coal-black hair and a smile that looked carved from cruelty. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. James Maddox, the man called out, his voice carrying clear and cold across the yard. Or should I call you John Rivers now? Hard to keep track of all your names. James's hand dropped to his gun. Lucas Garrett, The same. Lucas dismounted with fluid grace, his two companions following suit. All three were armed, their hands resting casually near their weapons. I've been looking for you for 2 years, Maddox. Imagine my surprise when I heard about a man matching your description getting married in this little backwater town. Thought I'd come offer my congratulations. Get off my property, Clara said, stepping forward before she could think better of it. Lucas's attention swiveled to her and his smile widened. And you must be the new Mrs. Rivers. Or is it Mrs. Maddox? So confusing. He tipped his hat in a mockery of politeness. Lucas Garrett, ma'am. James here killed my brother, shot him down in cold blood. I've come to collect the debt. Your brother was a murdering bastard who killed innocent people, James said flatly, including a pregnant woman. He got exactly what he deserved. That's not for you to decide. Lucas's voice went cold. Cole was family, blood. And out here, blood demands blood. Then take it up with me. Leave Clara out of this. But where's the fun in that? Lucas looked around the property, his gaze calculating. Nice place you've got here, ma'am. Be a shame if something happened to it. The threat was clear. Clara felt rage surge through her, hot and clean. You touch my property and I'll kill you myself. Lucas laughed, genuinely delighted. Oh, she's got fire. I like that. Cole would have liked her too, right before he... Finish that sentence and you're dead where you stand, James interrupted, his voice deadly calm. The tension ratcheted up another notch. Lucas's companions shifted, hands moving closer to their guns. For a moment, Clara was certain violence would erupt right there in her yard. Then Lucas smiled and raised his hands in a gesture of peace. Easy now. I'm not here to start trouble today. Just wanted to let you know I've found you. Wanted you to have time to think about what's coming. He swung back onto his horse. We'll be seeing each other again real soon, Maddox. And when we do, we're going to settle this properly, one way or another. He wheeled his horse and galloped away, his men following. They disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving Clara and James standing in the sudden silence. Clara's legs gave out. James caught her before she hit the porch, eased her down to sit on the steps. She was shaking, she realized. Shaking with rage and fear in equal measure. That's him, she said needlessly. That's Lucas Garrett. That's him. James sank down beside her, his face grim. I'm sorry, Clara. I should have known he'd find me. Should have left before... Don't! Clara grabbed his arm. Don't you dare apologize for this. He's the one threatening us. He's the one who won't let go. Because I killed his brother. Because his brother was a monster, and he can't accept it. Clara took a shuddering breath. What do we do? James was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Running won't work. He'll just follow. And if I face him alone, he'll come after you anyway, just to hurt me. Then we face him together. The decision crystallized in Clara's mind, clear and certain. We make a stand. Here. On our land. Clara, this is my home, James. Mine. I built it from nothing after Henry died. I survived that stagecoach massacre. I survived 2 years alone on the frontier. I'll be damned if I let some vengeful outlaw take it from me now. She looked at him, saw her own fierce determination reflected in his eyes. We fight. Together. Whatever it takes. James studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Together, he agreed. But we do it smart. We get help. We prepare. We don't let him dictate the terms. Agreed. Clara stood, her legs steady now. First thing, we tell Martha and Samuel, we're going to need allies. They walked into town an hour later, and Clara saw immediately that word had spread. People watched them pass with wary eyes, and she knew someone had seen Lucas and his men ride through. At the general store, Samuel met them at the door, his expression grave. Come in back, he said quietly, ushering them through to the storage room where they could talk privately. Martha was already there, pacing. I saw them, she said without preamble. 3 armed men looking like trouble. That was him, wasn't it? Lucas Garrett? Yes, James confirmed. He found me. Came to our property this morning. Made his intentions clear. Samuel crossed his arms. What are his intentions exactly? To kill me. Probably to hurt Clara in the process, just to make a point. James's voice was flat. I can leave. Get him to follow me away from here. No, Clara and Martha said simultaneously. You're part of this community now, Samuel added, married to one of our own. That makes this our problem too. James looked stunned. You don't even know me. Why would you risk yourselves? Because that's what we do here, Samuel said simply. We look after each other. Always have, always will. He paused. That said, we need to know what we're dealing with. Tell us everything. So James did. He told them about the stagecoach, about Cole Garrett's brutality, about the fair fight in Red Fork that had somehow become a murder charge. He told them about 2 years of running, of sleeping with one eye open, of Lucas's reputation for making examples of those who crossed him. When he finished, Martha's face was pale but determined. We need the territorial marshal. Lucas has marshals on his payroll, James said. That's how he got the warrant issued in the first place. Not all of them, Samuel argued. Marshal Hayes out of Guthrie. He's honest. Everyone knows it. If we can get word to him, explain the situation. That could take weeks, Clara interrupted. Lucas won't wait that long. He's playing with us now, but he'll move soon. Then we prepare for the worst. Samuel moved to a cabinet, pulled out a repeating rifle. I've got weapons. So do half the men in town. We form a watch, make sure Lucas can't catch anyone alone. You'd do that? James asked quietly. Put yourselves between me and him? We do it for Clara, Martha corrected gently. The fact that you're her husband just means you're included in the protection. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd lived in Crimson Ridge for 3 years, but she'd always felt like an outsider, the widow, the woman who'd survived when she shouldn't have. Now suddenly, she understood. They hadn't been keeping her at a distance. They'd been giving her space to grieve, to heal, to find her own strength. And now that she needed them, they were stepping up without hesitation. Thank you, she managed. Both of you. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans. Samuel would quietly organize the men, establish a rotation for watching Clara's property and the town's approaches. Martha would spread word among the women, make sure no one went anywhere alone. Clara and James would stay alert, vary their routines, never let their guard down. It was full dark by the time they headed home, and James insisted on taking a roundabout route, making sure they weren't followed. When they finally reached the cabin, he checked every room, every window, before allowing himself to relax even slightly. This is going to be our life now, Clara observed, watching him. Constant vigilance, never feeling safe. Until Lucas is dealt with, yes. James sat heavily at the table. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. Clara sat across from him. You saved my life once. Now we're saving each other's. That's what marriage is supposed to be, isn't it? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Not exactly what the Reverend preached about. No, but it's real. Clara reached across the table, took his hand. We're in this together, James. For better or worse. I meant those vows. His fingers tightened around hers. So did I. That night, they lay awake in the darkness, listening to every sound, jumping at every creak of wood or rustle of wind. Clara dozed fitfully, always aware of James beside her, his body tense even in sleep, his hand never far from the gun he'd placed on the nightstand. The next 3 days passed in tense anticipation. Lucas didn't appear, but his presence hung over everything like a storm cloud. Clara couldn't work in her garden without feeling watched. James couldn't walk to the barn without checking over his shoulder. The men of Crimson Ridge took turns watching the property, discreet but present, and their vigilance was both comforting and terrifying. Then, on the 4th night, Clara woke to the smell of smoke. She was on her feet instantly, shaking James awake. Fire! They stumbled outside to see flames consuming the barn, orange and red against the black sky. Bessie was screaming inside, and James didn't hesitate. He ran toward the inferno even as Clara screamed for him to stop. He emerged moments later dragging the terrified cow, his shirt smoldering, his face black with soot. Clara barely had time to feel relief before she saw it. Another fire, this one racing across the wheat field, eating through months of work in minutes. Lucas, James spat, and Clara heard the rage in his voice. They couldn't stop it. The barn was lost, the wheat destroyed. By the time the neighbors arrived with water and blankets, everything Clara had built was ashes and ruin. She stood in her yard watching her life burn, and felt something inside her harden into steel. This was war now. Lucas had made it war, and if he wanted a war, she would give him one. "I'm going to see him," she announced as dawn broke over the devastated property. "What?" James grabbed her arm. "Clara, no. That's what he wants." "I don't care what he wants." Clara's voice was cold. "He burned my barn, destroyed my crops. If he wants to talk, we'll talk. But it'll be on my terms, in public, where he can't just shoot me without witnesses. It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous now." Clara met his eyes. "But I won't hide. Won't cower. If Lucas Garrett wants to make an example of me, he's going to find out I'm not so easy to break." Martha, who'd arrived with Samuel and half the town, stepped forward. "She's right. Meeting him in town, in daylight, it's smart. Forces him to show his hand." "I don't like it," Samuel said, but there was reluctant respect in his voice. "None of us like it," Martha snapped. "But Clara's got courage, and sometimes that's enough." James looked like he wanted to argue, but he finally nodded. "Then I'm coming with you." "No." Clara's voice was firm. "This is between me and him. You being there would just escalate things." "Clara, trust me." She touched his face. "Please, trust me to do this." After a long moment, James nodded. "But I'll be close. Close enough to help if things go wrong." "They won't," Clara lied, and hoped she was right. That afternoon, she put on her Sunday dress, braided her hair, and walked into Crimson Ridge like she was going to church instead of facing down a killer. She'd sent word ahead through a boy from town. Lucas Garrett was invited to meet Mrs. Clara Rivers at the hotel for tea at 3 o'clock. Public, proper, civilized. She hoped the bastard had the nerve to show up. The Crimson Ridge Hotel was the finest building in town, which wasn't saying much. 2 stories of weathered clapboard with a sagging porch and windows that rattled in the wind. It served as hotel, saloon, and social center for anyone who had business that couldn't be conducted in the general store or church. Clara had been inside exactly twice in 3 years, once for a town meeting about the new well, and once for Martha's 50th birthday celebration. Now she climbed the steps at precisely 3 o'clock, her spine rigid, her hands steady despite the terror screaming through her veins. Half the town had found excuses to be nearby. Women browsing at the general store across the street, men gathered outside the blacksmith shop, all of them watching without appearing to watch. James was somewhere close, she knew, though she couldn't see him. The knowledge was both comforting and terrifying. The hotel keeper, a nervous man named William Foster, met her at the door. "Mrs. Rivers, I've prepared the corner table as you requested. Are you certain about this?" "Certain enough." Clara kept her voice low. "Has he arrived?" 10 minutes ago. He's waiting." Foster's hands twisted in his apron. "He brought 2 men with him. They're at the bar." "That's fine. I expected as much." Clara straightened her shoulders. "Tea service for 2, Mr. Foster. Your best china." "Yes, ma'am." He scurried away, clearly relieved to have something to do besides worry. Clara took a breath, smoothed her dress, and walked into the hotel's main room. It was dim inside after the bright afternoon sun, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, she saw him immediately, Lucas Garrett, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall, watching her with the lazy attention of a cat watching a mouse. He stood when he saw her, all false politeness and poisonous charm. "Mrs. Rivers, how delightful that you accepted my invitation." "I believe I was the one who invited you, Mr. Garrett." Clara crossed to the table, refusing to let her steps falter. Up close, Lucas was even younger than she'd thought, baby-faced almost, with smooth skin and dark eyes that held no light. He looked like he should be courting girls at church socials, not burning barns and threatening murder. Semantics. Lucas pulled out her chair with exaggerated courtesy. "Please sit. We have so much to discuss." Clara sat, arranging her skirts, buying time to study him. He wore expensive clothes, too expensive for the territory, Eastern tailored, and his hands were soft, uncalloused. This was a man who'd never done a day's honest work, who'd lived off his brother's violence and now sought to build his own reputation on revenge. "Tea will be along shortly," she said, her voice steady. "I thought it best we speak somewhere civilized, public." "Worried I might do something uncivilized in private?" Lucas's smile was all teeth. "You wound me, madam. I'm a gentleman. You're a man who burns barns in the night. That's not my definition of a gentleman. Something flickered in Lucas's eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she'd gone on the offensive so quickly. A barn that housed a wanted murderer. Surely you can't blame me for taking measures to smoke out my prey. James Maddox isn't here, Clara said flatly. This conversation is between you and me, woman to man. No games, no threats. Just honest discussion about what you want and what you're willing to accept. Lucas leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. Bold. I like that. Most women would be crying by now. I'm not most women. Clara held his gaze. I've survived things that would break you, Mr. Garrett. A barn fire is hardly going to send me running. The Lawton stage. Lucas's voice went soft. I heard about that. My brother's work, actually. He had such artistic flair when it came to terror. He tilted his head. Tell me, Mrs. Rivers, did he make you watch? When he killed the others? Cole always liked an audience for his best performances. Rage surged through Clara, hot and immediate, but she forced it down. This was what Lucas wanted, to make her emotional, to make her crack. Your brother was a coward who shot unarmed people. There was no art in what he did, just cruelty. Careful. The playfulness dropped from Lucas's voice like a mask falling away. You're speaking ill of family. I'm speaking truth. Clara leaned forward. Your brother Cole attacked that stagecoach. He killed 5 people in cold blood, including a pregnant woman and her husband. He would have killed me too if James Maddox hadn't stopped him. That's not opinion, Mr. Garrett. That's fact. My brother said it was Maddox who opened fire first, said he was defending himself. Your brother was a liar as well as a murderer. Clara kept her voice level despite the fury building in her chest. And you know it. You've known it all along. This isn't about justice. It's about pride. Lucas's hand slammed down on the table, hard enough to make the silverware jump. Several people in the bar turned to look, and Clara saw Lucas force himself to relax, to smile, to remember they had an audience. You have spirit, he said through gritted teeth. I'll give you that, but spirit won't save you when I decide to act. Won't it? Clara straightened, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. You came here to terrorize us, to make an example. But all you've done is prove you're as cowardly as your brother, attacking in the dark, burning property instead of facing your enemy head on. I could kill you right now. Lucas's voice was barely a whisper. Put a bullet in you before anyone could stop me. But you won't. Clara's heart was hammering, but she kept her expression calm. Because you need me alive. You need me to suffer, to grieve, to watch everything I love destroyed. That's how you think you'll hurt James, through me. It's pathetic, really. The words hung in the air between them, sharp as knives. Clara watched emotions flicker across Lucas's face, rage, disbelief, and underneath it all, something that might have been shame. She'd hit a nerve, exposed the truth he didn't want to acknowledge. Foster appeared with the tea service, his hands shaking as he set down the delicate china. Your tea, Mrs. Rivers, Mr. Garrett. Thank you, Mr. Foster. Clara's voice was gracious, as if she were hosting a normal social call. She poured tea with steady hands, offered Lucas a cup. Sugar? He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You're actually going to serve me tea? You accepted my invitation, Mr. Garrett. It would be rude not to. Clara added sugar to her own cup, stirred it slowly. Now, shall we discuss terms? Terms? Lucas's laugh was ugly. You think you're in a position to negotiate? I think I'm in a position to offer you something you want more than revenge. Clara met his eyes over the rim of her teacup. Your brother's reputation. That got his attention. Lucas went very still, his gaze sharpening. Explain. You want the world to remember Cole Garrett as something other than a vicious outlaw who got what he deserved. You want him remembered as a victim, a martyr, a man wronged by circumstances. Clara set her cup down with deliberate care. I can give you that. Or I can make sure everyone from here to St. Louis knows exactly what kind of monster he was. You're bluffing. But there was uncertainty in Lucas's voice. Am I? I was there, Mr. Garrett. I saw what your brother did. I can testify in court if it comes to that. Tell the territorial judge about the pregnant woman who begged for her baby's life, about the old woman whose last words were prayers, about how Cole laughed while he killed them. But Clara leaned forward. Or I can stay silent. Let you spin whatever story you want about how your brother died. All I ask in return is that you leave. Leave this town, leave James alone, and never come back. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table. Clara could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to find the trap in her offer. You'd lie for me? He asked finally. Tarnish your precious husband's reputation to protect him? I'd do whatever necessary to end this. Clara's voice was firm. James killed your brother in a fair fight. The fight is over. Let it be over. Just like that? Lucas's voice dripped with sarcasm. You think I'll just walk away because you asked nicely? I think you'll walk away because you're smart enough to recognize a losing battle. Clara held his gaze. You can't win here, Mr. Garrett. The town is against you. The territorial marshal will eventually hear about this. The real marshal, the honest one, not whoever you've bought. And when he does, your bribed warrant won't mean anything against eyewitness testimony of what your brother really was. You underestimate my reach. And you underestimate my resolve. Clara's voice went cold. I survived your brother's massacre. I rebuilt my life from ashes. Do you really think I'll let you destroy it now? I'll fight you, Mr. Garrett. I'll fight you in court, in the papers, in every venue available, and I'll win, because the truth is on my side. Lucas stared at her for a long moment, and Clara saw something shift in his expression. The lazy cruelty faded, replaced by something sharper, more calculating. This was the real Lucas Garrett, she realized. Not the playboy with the poisonous smile, but the cold strategist underneath. You're not what I expected, he said quietly. Neither are you. Clara took another sip of tea, using the moment to steady herself. I expected a man consumed by grief for his brother. Instead, I see someone who's using grief as an excuse for violence. You don't know anything about what I feel. Don't I? Clara set her cup down. I lost my husband 2 years ago. Henry Reeves, bitten by a rattlesnake while checking the fence line. I watched him die over 3 days, screaming in agony, begging me to end it. I couldn't, I just had to watch. Her voice cracked slightly, the first emotion she'd allowed to show. So yes, Mr. Garrett, I understand grief. I understand loss. But I also understand that using that pain to hurt others doesn't honor the dead. It just creates more pain. Lucas looked away, and for a moment he seemed younger, almost vulnerable. Cole raised me. After our parents died, he was all I had. He wasn't... He stopped, seemed to reconsider. He wasn't always like he became. There was good in him once. Then remember that version, Clara said softly. Remember the brother who raised you, not the man who killed innocent people. But let the rest go. Let James go. Let me go. Find some other way to honor Cole's memory. For a heartbeat, Clara thought she'd reached him. Thought maybe, impossibly, her words had found some kernel of humanity in Lucas Garrett, and this could end without more bloodshed. Then his expression hardened again, and she knew she'd failed. It's a pretty speech, Lucas said, his voice flat. But you're forgetting something. Cole may have done terrible things, but he was still my brother. And out here, blood is the only thing that matters. You don't let family go unavenged. You don't just walk away. He stood, looming over her. I gave you a chance to see reason, to convince Maddox to face me like a man. But you'd rather play games, rather negotiate like this is some business transaction. What else would you call it? Clara stood as well, refusing to let him tower over her. You want James dead to satisfy your pride. I want him alive because he's my husband. That's a conflict of interest that can only be resolved through compromise or violence. I choose violence. Lucas's smile was back, cold and terrible. And since you're so determined to involve yourself, you get to be part of it. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning your little barn fire was just the beginning. Lucas stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. I'm going to destroy everything you have, Clara Rivers. Everything you've built, everyone you care about. And I'm going to make James Maddox watch while I do it. Only when he's broken, when he has nothing left to live for, will I finally put a bullet in him. He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. That's what you've earned with your defiance. That's what happens when you cross me. Clara felt ice flood her veins, but she didn't step back, didn't flinch. Then I guess we're at war. I guess we are. Lucas straightened, adjusted his jacket. Thank you for the tea, Mrs. Rivers. It was illuminating. He walked away, his boots loud on the wooden floor. His 2 men detached from the bar and followed, and within moments they were gone, leaving Clara standing alone at the table with her untouched tea going cold. She made it outside before her legs gave out. James was there immediately, catching her, holding her up as her body finally acknowledged the terror it had been holding at bay. I've got you, he murmured, his arms solid around her. I've got you. You were magnificent. I failed, Clara choked out. I couldn't reach him, couldn't make him see reason. You tried. That's more than most would have done. James guided her to a bench, sat beside her, kept his arm around her shoulders. What did he say? Clara told him, every word, every threat. By the time she finished, James's expression was murderous. He's not going to stop, James said flatly. Not until one of us is dead. I know. Clara leaned into him, letting herself take comfort in his strength. So what do we do? We prepare for war. James's voice was grim. Real war. Because he just declared it. Martha appeared from the general store. Samuel closed behind. Others were converging too, men and women who'd been watching, who'd seen Lucas leave, who understood what was coming. What happened? Martha demanded. He refused to negotiate, Clara said tiredly. Threatened to destroy everything before he kills James. Then we make it so he can't. Samuel's voice was firm. We organize proper defenses, set watches around the clock, make sure no one's ever alone or vulnerable. That could take weeks, someone said. Maybe months. We can't sustain that. We do what we must, Martha snapped. Clara's one of ours now. We protect our own. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the simple acceptance, the fierce loyalty these people were offering to someone who'd been a stranger just days ago. There's another option. James stood, his hand finding Clara's and holding tight. I call him out. Official duel. Winner takes all. No, Clara said immediately. That's what he wants. It's the only way to end this quickly. James looked around at the gathered townspeople. Lucas won't give up. He'll burn buildings, hurt people, terrorize this whole town until he gets what he wants. But if I face him directly, if we settle this the old way, at least it's contained. Dueling's illegal in the territory, Samuel pointed out. So is burning barns and threatening innocent people. James's jaw was set. Sometimes the law is too slow to stop evil. Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands. And if you lose? Martha asked bluntly. If he kills you? Then at least it ends. Lucas gets his revenge and moves on. The rest of you are safe. No. Clara stood, fury giving her strength. We're not sacrificing you like some lamb to slaughter. There has to be another way. What way? James turned to her, frustration clear in his face. Tell me, Clara, what other option do we have? She didn't have an answer. The silence stretched, heavy with everyone's fear and uncertainty. Then a voice spoke from the back of the crowd. Get the territorial marshal. Everyone turned. Reverend Thompson stepped forward, his expression grave. I know it could take time. I know Lucas might act before help arrives. But it's the right way. The legal way. We send riders to Guthrie, explain the situation to Marshal Hayes. Let the law handle this. And in the meantime, someone asked, while we wait for the law to maybe show up? In the meantime, we protect ourselves. Reverend Thompson's voice was firm. We organize, we watch, we pray, and we trust that God will see us through. It wasn't a perfect solution. It wasn't even a good solution. But it was something, and right now something was better than nothing. All right, Samuel said. We send riders tomorrow at first light. 3 men, 3 different routes, in case Lucas tries to intercept one. They'll reach Guthrie in 2 days if they push hard. That's 4 days minimum before help could arrive, James pointed out. Maybe a week if Hayes is out on another case. Then we survive for 4 days. Martha's voice was steel. Or a week. However long it takes. We've survived worse. Had they, though? Clara looked at the faces around her, Farmers and shopkeepers, mothers and children, good people who'd come to the territory for fresh starts and honest lives. They weren't fighters, they weren't prepared for someone like Lucas Garrett, but they were willing to try, willing to stand together. And maybe that would be enough. The crowd dispersed slowly, people breaking into small groups to discuss watch schedules and defensive positions. James and Clara walked back toward their property in silence, both lost in thought. When they arrived, the devastation looked even worse in the fading light. The barn was a blackened skeleton, the wheat field nothing but ash and stubble. Everything Clara had worked for, destroyed in a single night. "I'll help you rebuild," James said quietly. "After this is over, we'll make it better than before." "If there is an after," Clara's voice was hollow. "Lucas won't wait patiently while we summon the law. He'll move soon." "I know." James turned to survey the ruined property. "We need to fortify. Board up windows, create clear sight lines, eliminate anywhere he could hide for an ambush." They worked until full dark, James's military precision evident in how he assessed vulnerabilities and planned defenses. By the time they finished, the cabin was as secure as they could make it, and Clara was exhausted in body and spirit. Inside, she sat at the table while James checked the gun he'd placed by the door, then the one by the window, making sure both were loaded and ready. The domesticity of earlier days was gone, replaced by the grim reality of people preparing for siege. "I'm sorry," Clara said suddenly, "for dragging you to that meeting, for thinking I could reason with him." "Don't apologize." James came to sit across from her. "You had to try. That's who you are, someone who looks for solutions instead of just accepting violence." "But it didn't work. I just made him angrier." "Maybe. Or maybe you planted a seed of doubt, made him question, just for a moment, whether this revenge is worth it." James reached across the table, took her hand. "Either way, you faced him down. You looked a killer in the eye and didn't blink. That takes courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." His thumb traced circles on her palm, the touch simultaneously comforting and electric. "Clara, if things go bad, if Lucas comes before the marshal arrives, I need you to promise me something." "No." Clara pulled her hand back. "Whatever you're about to ask, the answer is no. You don't know what I'm going to say. You're going to ask me to run, to save myself and let you face him alone. And I'm telling you now, I won't do it." James's expression was pained. "Clara, no." She stood, began pacing. "We're in this together. You don't get to sacrifice yourself nobly and leave me behind. That's not how this works." "That's exactly how this works if it means keeping you alive." "And what about keeping you alive?" Clara spun to face him. "Does that not matter? Am I supposed to just accept losing you the way I lost Henry? Watch another man She stopped, the words catching in her throat. James stood slowly. "Another man you what?" Clara looked away, her heart hammering. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." "Clara." He crossed to her, gently turned her face back toward his. "Say it." "It's too soon," she whispered. "We barely know each other. It's adrenaline and proximity and—" "Say it anyway." She met his eyes, saw her own fear and hope reflected there. "Another man I care about. Another man who matters. I can't—" Her voice broke. "I can't lose you, James. I won't survive it." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, his hands framing her face like she was something precious and breakable. Clara kissed him back with all the fear and fury and need churning inside her, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "I care about you too. More than I should. More than is wise." "Then stay alive." Clara's hands fisted in his shirt. "However this ends, whatever happens, stay alive. Promise me." "I promise to try. Not good enough." "It's all I can give." James's voice was raw. "But I swear to you, Clara, I will fight with everything I have to come back to you. It would have to be enough." Clara nodded, let him pull her close, stood in his arms while the night deepened outside, and somewhere in the darkness, Lucas Garrett plotted their destruction. They didn't sleep much that night. Every sound brought them alert. Every creak of wood or rustle of wind made James reach for his gun. Dawn came as a relief, gray light seeping through the windows. Another night survived. The riders left for Guthrie as promised, 3 men on fast horses carrying letters explaining the situation. Samuel organized the watch, men taking turns patrolling the town and surrounding properties. Women gathered children close, kept them near homes, prepared to shelter in the church if violence erupted. 2 days passed in tense anticipation, then 3. Lucas didn't appear, didn't attack, gave no sign of his presence beyond the burned barn standing as testament to his threat. The waiting was almost worse than action would have been, the constant vigilance exhausting. On the 4th day, Clara was in the cabin preparing dinner when she heard it, horses approaching fast. Too fast. James was at the door in seconds, gun drawn, and Clara grabbed the rifle they'd kept loaded by the hearth. But it wasn't Lucas who appeared. It was one of the riders they'd sent to Guthrie, his horse lathered and blowing hard, his face grim. "Marshal Hayes is dead," he called out before he'd even dismounted. "Ambushed 2 days ago on the road. We didn't know until we reached Guthrie." Clara felt the words hit like a physical blow. Their best hope, gone. Killed before he could help them. "The other 2 marshals in the territory office?" James asked, though his tone said he already knew the answer. "One's in Texas chasing rustlers. Won't be back for weeks. The rider swallowed hard. Others on Lucas Garrett's payroll. Bragged about it in the saloon, said he'd make sure nobody interfered with justice being done." The silence that followed was crushing. No marshal, no law, no help coming. They were on their own. "All right," James said finally, his voice eerily calm. "Then we do this the old way. I challenge Lucas to a duel tomorrow at dawn, Main Street. Fair fight. Winner walks away." "James," Clara started, but he cut her off. "It's the only way left. We both know it." He turned to the rider. "Can you get word to Lucas? Tell him James Maddox formally challenges him. Tomorrow. Sunrise. No tricks, no ambushes. Just him and me." The rider nodded slowly. "He's staying at the old Crawford place east of town. I'll ride out now." "Thank you." James watched him go, then turned to Clara. "I need you to promise me something." "I already told you." "Not that." His voice was gentle. "I need you to promise that whatever happens tomorrow, you'll keep living, keep building, keep fighting for the life you want. Don't let my death, if it comes to that, stop you from having a future." "That's not fair." Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. "You can't ask me to plan for losing you. I'm not asking you to plan for it. I'm asking you to survive it." James pulled her close, held her like he could keep the whole world at bay through sheer force of will. "You're stronger than you know, Clara. Strong enough to survive anything, even this." She wanted to argue, wanted to scream that this was wrong, that there had to be another way, that she refused to accept a world where violence was the only answer. But the words wouldn't come. She just held him, memorizing the feel of him, the scent of him, trying to burn every detail into her memory in case tomorrow took him away forever. That night they loved each other with the desperate intensity of people running out of time, and when morning came, cold and gray and merciless, Clara dressed in her widow's black and prepared to watch the man she loved walk into death. The walk to Main Street felt like a funeral procession. Clara moved beside James in silence, her black dress stark against the pale dawn light, her hand clasped in his with a grip that bordered on painful. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said in the dark hours before dawn when they'd held each other and pretended tomorrow might never come. But tomorrow had come anyway, relentless as death. The entire town was already gathered, lining both sides of Main Street in a corridor of witnesses. Clara saw Martha standing with Samuel, her face pale but determined, saw Reverend Thompson with his Bible clutched tight, lips moving in silent prayer, saw the Johnsons and their children, the blacksmith, the banker, the schoolteacher, everyone who'd made Crimson Ridge their home, all of them here to watch 2 men settle their blood debt the oldest way humanity knew. Lucas was already waiting, standing in the center of the street with that poisonous smile playing at his lips. His 2 men flanked him, both armed, both watching the crowd with predatory attention. Clara felt James tense beside her, recognized the tactical assessment happening behind his eyes as he cataloged threats and calculated angles. Maddox, Lucas called out, his voice carrying clear in the morning stillness. I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve. I'm here. James stopped at the edge of the street, 30 paces from Lucas. But we do this right. Fair fight. No interference from your men or anyone else. Agreed. Lucas spread his hands in a gesture of false magnanimity. Just you and me. First blood? First shot. Or do we keep going until one of us doesn't get up? Until it's finished, James's voice was flat. One way or another, this ends today. So be it. Lucas's smile widened. Though I have to say, I'm disappointed your lovely wife didn't try harder to talk you out of this. I was looking forward to her begging. Clara felt rage surge through her, hot and immediate, but she forced it down. This was what Lucas wanted, to make them emotional, to throw them off balance. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. We need terms, Samuel called out, stepping forward. As the town's de facto leader in the absence of any law, he was the closest thing they had to an official. Rules everyone agrees to. Simple enough, Lucas said. We face off in the street. Someone counts to 3. We draw. Last man standing wins. And your men? Samuel gestured to Lucas's companions. They stay out of it? They will if Maddox's little army does. Lucas's gaze swept the crowd, lingering on the men who'd been standing watch. Everyone stays back. Everyone keeps their weapons holstered. This is between him and me. James nodded slowly. Agreed, but I want it witnessed properly. I want everyone here to see that whatever happens, it was fair. Afraid you'll lose and want your reputation intact? Lucas's mockery was sharp. How noble. Afraid you'll win by cheating and want to make sure no one can call it fair, James shot back. Your brother's reputation was built on murdering the helpless. I won't give you the chance to claim the same glory. Lucas's expression darkened. My brother was a warrior. Your brother was a coward who shot pregnant women. James's voice was cold. And everyone here knows it. The only question is whether you're any different. The tension ratcheted impossibly tighter. Clara saw Lucas's hand drift toward his gun, saw James shift his weight in preparation. This was it. The moment that would determine everything. Wait! Martha's voice cut through the silence like a blade. She marched into the street, positioned herself between the 2 men. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. Both men will be searched for hidden weapons. Both will stand at equal distance from a marked line. And I'll do the counting, not either of your men. Lucas looked like he wanted to argue, but the crowd murmured approval. Too many witnesses now, too much scrutiny. He couldn't refuse without looking like he planned to cheat. Fine, he bit out. Search away. Martha approached Lucas first, her movements brisk and efficient. She patted him down thoroughly, checking his boots, his belt, his jacket. He bore it with ill grace, his jaw tight. When she was satisfied, she moved to James and repeated the process. Clara watched her check every pocket, every concealed spot where a weapon might hide. They're both clean, Martha announced, stepping back. No hidden guns, no knives, fair fight. Samuel had been measuring the street while Martha searched. Now he marked a line in the dirt with his boot heel, then paced off 15 steps in each direction. Here and here, both men start on opposite sides of the line. When Martha counts to 3, you draw. Any man who draws before 3 is declared forfeit, and the other wins by default. It was as fair as they could make it. Clara knew that. Knew that James had the skills, had survived 2 years of running and fighting. But she also knew that luck played a role in these things, that a fraction of a second could mean the difference between life and death. James turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her heart crack. Clara, don't. She grabbed his shirt, pulled him close. Don't say goodbye. You're coming back to me. I'll try. He kissed her forehead, gentle and achingly tender. But if I don't, then I'll burn the world down looking for revenge. Clara's voice was fierce. So you'd better survive, because I'm not ready to become that person. He almost smiled at that. Yes, ma'am. Then he was walking away, moving to his mark on Samuel's signal. Lucas took his position on the opposite side, and suddenly 30 feet had never looked so vast or so small. Martha positioned herself off to the side, equidistant from both men. Last chance for anyone to reconsider. Neither man moved. The crowd held its collective breath. All right then, Martha's voice was steady. On my count, 1. Clara's hands clenched into fists. She couldn't watch, couldn't look away. Time seemed to slow, stretching each second into an eternity. 2. James's posture was relaxed, his hand loose near his gun, but Clara could see the coiled tension in him, could read the readiness in every line of his body. Lucas was rigid by comparison, all his attention focused on James, his breathing too fast. He's nervous, Clara realized with shock. Lucas Garrett, for all his threats and violence, was scared. 3. Both men moved. The sound of gunfire was simultaneous, 2 shots cracking out so close together they almost sounded like one. Clara's scream caught in her throat as she watched James stagger, watched red bloom on his left shoulder. But Lucas was falling, his gun dropping from nerveless fingers, his hands clutching at his chest where blood was already spreading in a dark stain. Lucas hit the ground hard, gasping. James stayed on his feet, his left arm hanging useless, his gun still steady in his right hand aimed at where Lucas had been standing. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Lucas's men were rushing forward, and so were Samuel and the other townsmen, and suddenly everyone was shouting at once, "Stay back!" James's voice cut through the chaos, and something in his tone made everyone freeze. "Nobody moves until this is finished." He walked forward slowly, approached where Lucas lay struggling to breathe. Clara rushed to follow, ignoring Martha's attempt to hold her back. Lucas looked up at James, and Clara saw genuine surprise in his eyes. "You actually hit me." You drew first," James said flatly, "faster than I expected, but your aim was off. Should have practiced more." Lucas coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Cole always said I was sloppy." "Your brother was right about that, at least." James knelt beside him, and Clara was shocked to see something like pity in his expression. "Did you really think this would make you feel better? That killing me would somehow bring him back?" Lucas tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet gurgle. "Thought it would mean something. Thought—" He coughed again, harder. "Thought it would make me more than his shadow." "You could have been more," James said quietly. "Could have been anything. You chose this." "We all choose." Lucas's eyes found Clara, standing just behind James. "You were right about him, about Cole. He was a monster." Another cough. "I just couldn't admit it, couldn't let him be the villain." Clara felt something twist in her chest. Even now, dying in the dirt, Lucas was still trying to defend his brother, still trying to make sense of loyalty to someone who'd never deserved it. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. Sorry for Lucas's wasted potential. Sorry that grief had twisted him into something dark. Sorry that this was how it had to end. Lucas's laugh was barely a whisper. "Don't be. I knew what I was doing." His gaze shifted back to James. "Make it count. The life I'm giving you. Make it worth it." Then his eyes went distant, and the tension fled his body in a rush. Clara watched the life leave Lucas Garrett, watched him become just another corpse in a territory full of dead men who died for pride and violence in causes that didn't matter in the end. "He's gone," Reverend Thompson said softly, appearing beside them. He'd moved so quietly, Clara hadn't heard him approach. "God have mercy on his soul." James stood slowly, favoring his injured shoulder. The adrenaline was wearing off. Clara could see it in the way he swayed slightly. She was at his side immediately, supporting him. "You're hit." "It's not bad. Went through clean." But his face was pale, his breathing shallow. "Someone get the doctor," Martha commanded, and 2 men took off running. Lucas's men had frozen when their leader fell, uncertain. Now they looked at each other, then at the armed townspeople surrounding them. The calculation was clear on their faces. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and their reason for being here was dead in the street. "We're leaving," one of them said finally. "This wasn't our fight anyway. We were just hired guns." "Then go," Samuel said, "and don't come back. You're not welcome in Crimson Ridge." They went, retrieving their horses and riding out without looking back. Clara watched them disappear into the rising sun, taking with them the last remnants of Lucas Garrett's vendetta. The doctor arrived as James's knees finally buckled. Clara and Samuel caught him between them, eased him down to sit on the edge of the boardwalk. The doctor, A grizzled man named Patterson, who'd seen more than his share of gunshot wounds, examined James's shoulder with efficient hands. "You're lucky," he pronounced. "Bullet went straight through, missed bone, and major vessels. You'll be sore for a few weeks, but you'll heal." He began cleaning the wound, and James hissed in pain. "Try not to get shot again anytime soon." "I'll do my best." James's attempt at humor fell flat, exhaustion clear in his voice. Clara held his good hand while Patterson worked, cleaning and bandaging, issuing instructions about changing dressings and watching for infection. Around them, the crowd was dispersing slowly, the tension finally breaking now that the danger had passed. "What do we do with him?" someone asked, gesturing to Lucas's body. "Bury him proper," Reverend Thompson said firmly. "Whatever he did, whatever he was, he deserves that much. We'll lay him to rest in the cemetery, say words over his grave." He looked around at the assembled townspeople. "We've had enough death. Let's at least treat it with dignity." No one argued. Martha organized a group to handle the body, to prepare it for burial. Clara helped James back to their cabin, supporting most of his weight, acutely aware of how close she'd come to losing him. Inside, she eased him into a chair and went to make coffee with hands that shook. The reality was hitting her now that the danger had passed. James could have died, could have fallen in that street and left her alone again. The thought made her stomach turn. "Clara," his voice was soft. "Come here." She abandoned the coffee, went to him. He pulled her down to sit on his lap, careful of his injured shoulder, and wrapped his good arm around her waist. "It's over," he said. "Really over. Lucas is dead. His men are gone. No one's hunting me anymore. The warrant. With Lucas dead and Marshal Hayes gone, I doubt anyone will care about an old warrant for a justified killing. And even if they do," he squeezed her gently, "even if they do, I'm not running anymore. I'm staying here with you." Clara buried her face in his neck, let herself finally cry. All the fear, all the tension, all the terrible waiting, it poured out in wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. James held her through it, murmuring wordless comfort, his presence solid and real and alive. When she finally cried herself out, the sun was high and the coffee had gone cold on the stove. Clara wiped her face, feeling empty and exhausted, but somehow lighter. "We should get you to bed," she said. "You need rest." In a minute, James caught her hand before she could stand. "I need to say something first." Clara waited, seeing him struggle to find words. "When I stepped off that stage and saw you," he began slowly, "I thought fate was playing the cruelest joke imaginable. Delivering me to the one person I'd never forgotten, the one person I'd thought about every single day for 2 years, and doing it in a way that put you in danger." He paused. "I should have left immediately, should have gotten back on that stage and disappeared, but I was selfish. I wanted—" His voice cracked. "I wanted so badly to have something good, something real, to be more than just the man running from his past." "James, let me finish." He squeezed her hand. "These past days, even with the danger, even with Lucas hunting us, they've been the best of my life. Because I got to be with you. Got to have a home, a wife, a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just survival. And I know it started as a lie, as John Rivers, the fake husband, but somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real. This life became real." Clara's tears were flowing again, but they were different now. Not grief or fear, but something sweeter. "What I'm trying to say," James continued, "is that I love you. I've loved you since that cave 2 years ago when you looked at me like I was a hero instead of a killer. I loved you when I stepped off that stage and saw your face. I love you now, sitting here in this cabin, married to me for reasons that had nothing to do with love but became love anyway." He brought her hand to his lips. "And if you'll have me, not as John Rivers, not as some arrangement, but as James Maddox, wanted gunslinger with a bloody past and uncertain future, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Clara couldn't speak through the tightness in her throat. Instead, she kissed him, pouring everything she felt into the contact, all her fear and relief and desperate, overwhelming love for this impossible man who'd saved her twice now. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you too. I think I've loved you since you carried me through that massacre, Since you stayed awake for 3 days telling me stories to keep me alive. I love you for answering my advertisement. I love you for staying when you could have run. I love you for facing Lucas to protect this town." She pulled back to look him in the eye. "And I love you for being brave enough to tell me the truth, all of it, even the parts that hurt. So you'll keep me?" There was vulnerability in his question that made her heart ache. "Forever," she promised. "However long we have. Through whatever comes next. You're mine, James Maddox, and I don't let go of what's mine." His smile was brilliant, transforming his face. "Yes, ma'am." They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other, letting the reality sink in. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, against violence and vengeance and the weight of the past, they'd survived. Eventually, Clara helped James to bed despite his protests that he was fine. She changed his bandages, made him drink water, and sat beside him until exhaustion finally pulled him under into sleep. Only then did she let herself leave, stepping out onto the porch to survey the ruined property in the afternoon light. The burned barn, the destroyed wheat, the markers of violence that had nearly taken everything from her. But they hadn't. She was still here. James was still here. And the land would recover, given time and work. Martha appeared an hour later with a basket of food and an expression that suggested she wouldn't tolerate any argument about needing to be alone. "How is he?" "Sleeping. The doctor said he'll heal." Clara accepted the basket gratefully. "Thank you for everything, for believing in us, for standing with us. That's what family does." Martha settled into the chair beside Clara's. "And like it or not, you're family now. You and that stubborn man of yours." "He told me he loves me." Clara said the words wonderingly, still not quite believing them. "Of course he does. Anyone with eyes could see it." Martha smiled. "The question is, what happens now? Now that the danger's past and you're stuck with a husband who's not at all what you advertised for." Clara looked at the cabin, thought about James sleeping inside, thought about the life they could build here. "Now we rebuild. We plant new wheat. We raise the barn. We become the boring married couple who argues about chickens and complains about the weather." "Boring," Martha laughed. "Somehow I doubt you two will ever be boring, but it's a nice dream." "It is," Clara agreed. "And after everything, I think we've earned the right to chase boring dreams." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun move across the sky. Samuel arrived as evening approached, bringing more food, and the news that Lucas had been buried in the cemetery with appropriate words and no fanfare. His men had been seen riding south, likely heading back to whatever hell they'd crawled from originally. "There's talk of putting up a territorial office here," Samuel said. "Proper law presence to discourage future trouble. Judge Wilson from Guthrie says he'll push for it." "Good." Clara thought about Marshall Hayes, dead on a road somewhere, killed by the very lawlessness he'd tried to prevent. "We need it. Need to be more than just a collection of people hoping violence passes us by." "Agreed." Samuel paused. "There's also talk about James, about his warrant. General consensus is that it was a setup, that Lucas bribed officials to make a fair fight look like murder. Judge Wilson says he'll review the case, likely dismiss charges." Clara felt relief wash through her. "So he's free? Really free? Free as anyone is out here." Samuel's smile was kind. "He can use his real name again. Be who he really is, though I suspect most folks will keep calling him John Rivers for a while. Habit, you know." "I don't think he'll mind." Clara thought about how James had held on to the Rivers name like a lifeline, like proof he could be someone other than a wanted killer. Maybe he'll appreciate having both options. Samuel and Martha stayed for dinner, helping Clara prepare the food Martha had brought and keeping up a steady stream of conversation that filled the cabin with warmth. James woke as they were eating, drawn by the smell and the voices, and joined them at the table despite Clara's protests that he should rest. "I've rested enough," he said, wincing as he settled into a chair. "Besides, I'm starving." They ate together, the four of them, talking about everything and nothing. Samuel told stories about the early days of Crimson Ridge, when it was just a trading post and a dream. Martha shared gossip about the upcoming harvest festival. James contributed the occasional dry comment that made everyone laugh. It felt normal, comfortable, like family. After Samuel and Martha left, Clara and James sat on the porch in the deepening twilight. Bessie was contentedly grazing nearby, apparently no worse for wear from her fiery rescue. The chickens had settled in for the night. Everything was peaceful. "I never thought I'd have this," James said quietly. "A home, a wife, people who give a damn whether I live or die." "You have it now." Clara leaned against his good shoulder. "What are you going to do with it?" "Live," he said simply. "Really live, not just survive. Help you rebuild what Lucas destroyed. Maybe start a family eventually, if you want that." Clara's hand drifted to her stomach, remembering Lucas's threat to destroy everyone she cared about. A child would be vulnerable, would be a target if danger ever came calling again. But the danger was gone now. Lucas was dead. The past was buried along with him. "I'd like that," she said. "A family. Children running around the property. Growing old together." "Growing old sounds good." James's arm tightened around her. "Never thought I'd live long enough to worry about gray hair and creaking joints." "Well, you'd better get used to the idea." Clara tilted her face up to kiss his jaw. "Because I plan to keep you around for a very long time." They sat there until the stars came out, marking constellations and making quiet plans for tomorrow and the day after and all the days that would follow. The night was cool but not cold, and the wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. Inside, eventually, they made their way to bed. James's shoulder was still tender, so they moved carefully, learning new ways to fit together that accommodated injury. But the gentleness only made it sweeter, made every touch and whisper feel precious. "Thank you," James murmured as Clara curled against his good side, "for saving me, for giving me a reason to stop running." "Thank you for the same." Clara traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. "For stepping off that stage, for staying, for fighting." "Always," he promised, "for as long as you'll have me." Clara fell asleep listening to him breathe, finally believing that tomorrow would come without bringing disaster, that they'd survived the worst and earned their chance at happiness, that the man beside her wouldn't vanish like smoke, but would be there when she woke, solid and real and hers. Morning came gentle, sunlight streaming through the window to paint everything gold. Clara woke to find James already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning." He brushed hair back from her face. "I had a thought." "Dangerous thing, thinking so early." His laugh was quiet. "We should have a real wedding. Not the rushed ceremony with danger hanging over us, but a proper celebration. Invite the whole territory. Let me marry you as James Maddox, not John Rivers." Clara considered it, the idea of standing before everyone without lies, without pretense, declaring their love openly. It was appealing. "You want to do vows again?" "I want to do them right. Want to stand in front of God and everyone and claim you as mine with my real name. Want there to be no doubt, no shadow of the past hanging over us." He paused. "Unless you'd rather not." "No, Clara smiled. "I'd like that. A fresh start, new vows for our new life." Then it settled. James pulled her closer, mindful of his shoulder. "As soon as I'm healed enough to stand through a ceremony without passing out, we'll do it properly." They spent the morning in bed, talking and planning, and occasionally falling into comfortable silences. When Clara finally rose to make breakfast, she felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of fear was gone, replaced by something that felt suspiciously like joy. Over the next weeks, as James's shoulder healed and summer faded toward autumn, they began the work of rebuilding. Samuel organized a barn raising, and half the territory showed up to help. In 3 days, a new barn stood where the old one had burned, larger and sturdier than before. James proved as skilled with carpentry as he'd claimed, his hands sure despite the lingering stiffness in his left shoulder. Clara worked beside him, and together they created something beautiful from the ashes of destruction. Judge Wilson arrived from Guthrie 6 weeks after the duel, bringing official word that all charges against James Maddox had been dismissed. The investigation had revealed Lucas's bribery, the false testimony, the corrupt officials. James's name was clear. "You're a free man, Mr. Maddox," Judge Wilson said, shaking James's hand, "with the territory's apologies for the injustice done to you." James accepted it with quiet dignity, though Clara saw the emotion in his eyes. 2 years of running, of looking over his shoulder, of being branded a criminal for doing the right thing, finally ended with official acknowledgement that he'd been wronged. That night, they celebrated with the whole town. Martha organized a feast, Samuel contributed his best whiskey, and Reverend Thompson blessed the gathering. It was the wedding celebration they'd never had, except better because it was born from survival and community and hard-won peace. Clara danced with James under the stars, his shoulder healed enough now that he could move freely. She looked around at the faces of their neighbors, their friends, and felt gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "Happy?" James asked, pulling her close. Deliriously. Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "Though I never imagined happiness would look like this." "What did you imagine?" "Honestly, after Henry died, I didn't imagine happiness at all. Just survival, just getting through each day." She looked up at him. "You gave me more than that. You gave me a reason to want tomorrow." "You did the same for me." James's expression was serious. "I was dead inside, Clara, just going through motions, waiting for Lucas or someone like him to finally catch me. You made me want to live again." They renewed their vows the following Sunday, standing in the small church with the whole town as witnesses. This time, when Reverend Thompson asked if James Maddox took Clara Reeves to be his lawfully wedded wife, James's "I do" rang clear and true. And when Clara pledged herself to him, not to John Rivers the convenient fiction, but to James Maddox the complicated reality, she meant every word with her whole heart. The kiss that sealed their marriage was longer this time, deeper, full of promise and passion, and the bone-deep certainty that they'd found something worth keeping. Autumn turned to winter, and winter to spring. Clara's belly swelled with new life, and James hovered like a nervous hen despite her insistence that pregnancy wasn't an illness. The wheat they'd planted in the fall came in strong, and the new barn housed not just Bessie, but a pair of horses James had traded for, and a litter of barn cats to keep the mice down. Life was good. Hard, certainly, farming always was, but good in a way Clara had never dared hope for. On a warm May morning, with Martha acting as midwife and James pacing anxiously outside, Clara brought their daughter into the world. She was small and red and furious at being born, her cries loud enough to wake the dead. "She has your spirit," Martha said with a laugh, placing the squalling infant in Clara's arms. Clara looked down at her daughter, at the tiny fists and scrunched face and dark hair that would probably lighten with time, and felt love so fierce it was almost frightening. "Hello," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." James was allowed in then, and the look on his face when he saw his daughter made Clara's heart turn over. He touched the baby's cheek with one gentle finger, wonder written in every line of his body. "She's perfect," he breathed. "She's ours," Clara corrected, and watched him smile. They named her Hope, partly for the obvious symbolism, and partly because Clara insisted that Hope Maddox was a strong name for a frontier child, a name that promised better things ahead. And as Clara sat in bed with her husband beside her, and their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, she thought about that day on the porch when James had stepped off the stagecoach and shattered her world. How she'd thought he couldn't be her mail-order husband, that fate was playing a cruel joke. She'd been right, in a way. He wasn't the husband she'd advertised for, wasn't the simple farmer looking for a simple life. He was so much more. He was the man who'd saved her life. The man who'd loved her enough to stay when running would have been easier. The man who'd faced down his demons and won. The man who'd given her not just survival, but joy. Not just a home, but a family. He was hers, utterly and completely. And she was his. And as spring sunshine streamed through the window and painted everything in shades of gold, Clara knew with absolute certainty that every moment of fear and pain and struggle had been worth it for this. For the family sleeping and waking in her arms, for the life they'd built from ashes, for the future spreading before them full of possibility and promise. The past was buried. The present was beautiful. And the future? The future was hope. Hope Maddox was 3 months old when the first letter arrived, delivered by a circuit rider who apologized for the delay. It had been sitting in the territorial office in Guthrie for weeks before someone thought to send it out to Crimson Ridge. Clara was hanging laundry when James brought it to her, his expression puzzled. It's addressed to both of us. No return address, but it's got an official seal from the territorial governor's office. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, took the envelope with curiosity mixed with apprehension. After everything they'd been through, official correspondence still made her nervous. She broke the seal and unfolded the thick paper inside, James reading over her shoulder. It was a formal letter of commendation. The territorial governor, having reviewed the circumstances surrounding the deaths of Cole and Lucas Garrett, wished to recognize James Maddox for his actions in protecting innocent lives during the Lawton Stage massacre. Furthermore, the letter stated the territory was prepared to offer Mr. Maddox a position as deputy marshal for the Crimson Ridge district, should he be interested in serving. Clara read it twice, certain she'd misunderstood. They want you to be a lawman? Apparently. James's voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the conflict in his eyes. It's ironic, isn't it? 2 years running from the law, and now they want me to enforce it. What do you think? Clara folded the letter, studied his face. Is it something you'd want? James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Part of me wants to say no. Wants to tell them I'm done with violence, that I just want to farm and raise my daughter and live quietly. He paused. But another part remembers Marshall Hayes, remembers how he tried to do right and got killed for it. This territory needs honest men willing to stand up to people like Lucas. Maybe I could be that. You could, Clara touched his arm. You'd be good at it. Fair. But James, you don't owe the territory anything. You've already paid your debt 10 times over. I know. He turned to face her fully. But maybe that's exactly why I should do it. Not because I owe anyone, but because I can. Because I know what it's like to be on the wrong side of corrupt law, and I could make sure others don't suffer the same. Clara saw the conviction growing in his eyes, saw him working through the decision in real time. It would be dangerous. Everything worth doing is. James took her hands. But I wouldn't take it if you weren't comfortable. Your opinion matters more than any official appointment. Clara thought about it, weighing the risks against the good James could do. Thought about Hope growing up in a territory where law meant something, where violence wasn't the only answer to problems. Thought about the kind of man James was, someone who'd saved her when he could have just saved himself, who'd faced down his demons instead of running forever. I think you should do it, she said finally, but on one condition. Name it. You don't do it alone. You build a network of deputies you trust. You train the townspeople in basic law enforcement. You create a system that doesn't depend on one man being a hero. Clara squeezed his hands. Because I need you to come home every night. Our daughter needs her father. Promise me you'll be smart about this. I promise. James pulled her close, careful of the sleeping baby strapped to Clara's chest in a sling Martha had made. Smart, careful, and home every night for dinner. He wrote his acceptance that afternoon, and 2 weeks later a federal marshal arrived from Guthrie to swear James in officially. The ceremony took place in the church, with the whole town watching, and when James raised his right hand and swore to uphold the law and protect the innocent, Clara felt pride swell in her chest. This was the man she'd married, not a wanted outlaw or a simple farmer, but something more complex and beautiful, a man who'd walked through darkness and chosen to become light. The appointment changed things in Crimson Ridge, mostly for the better. James divided his time between farming and law enforcement, patrolling the district once a week and handling disputes as they arose. He was fair but firm, and word spread quickly that the new deputy marshal couldn't be bribed or intimidated. Trouble did come, occasionally. A group of rustlers tried to steal cattle from the Johnson Ranch and found themselves facing down James and 3 armed townsmen he'd deputized for the emergency. A card sharp tried to cheat at the hotel saloon and ended up spending 3 days in the makeshift jail James had established in an old storage shed before being escorted to Guthrie for trial. But the worst incident came 6 months into James's tenure, on a cold November morning when Clara was working in the garden with Hope bundled against her back. She heard the horses before she saw them, 6 riders coming fast from the south. Clara's hand went instinctively to the rifle she kept propped against the fence post now, her heart starting to race. James was in town at the general store, helping Samuel unload a shipment. The riders slowed as they approached, and Clara felt her breath catch. They looked rough. Trail-worn and heavily armed, the kind of men who lived by violence. The leader was older, maybe 50, with gray in his beard and eyes like chips of flint. "Help you, gentlemen?" Clara called out, her voice steady despite her fear. The leader smiled, revealing missing teeth.
"We're looking for a man, James Maddox. Heard he's settled around these parts." Clara's blood ran cold.
"What do you want with him?" "Old business. Nothing for a pretty lady to worry about." The man's eyes raked over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Though I have to say, Maddox always did have good taste. You his woman?" "I'm his wife." Clara shifted slightly, making sure Hope was protected behind her. "And whatever business you think you have with him, you can state it to me first." The man laughed, ugly and mean. "Feisty. I like that. But see, our business is the killing kind. Maddox put my brother in the ground about 4 years back. Time I returned the favor. Another vengeance seeker. Another ghost from James's past come to destroy their present." Clara felt rage surge through her, hot and immediate. "Your brother have a name?" "Danny Reeves," the man spat. "Maddox shot him during a robbery. Claimed it was self-defense, but I know better." Reeves. The name was familiar, tugging at Clara's memory. Then she remembered. James had told her about it one night when she'd asked about his past. A bank robbery in Missouri. A security guard named Maddox who'd killed one of the robbers when the man tried to shoot a customer. It had been James's first kill, the moment that had set him on the path to becoming the man he was. "It was self-defense," Clara said flatly. "Your brother was robbing a bank. He pointed a gun at an innocent woman. James stopped him." "That's Maddox's version." The man's hand drifted toward his gun. "I prefer to hear it from him before I kill him, so why don't you tell me where he is?" "No." Clara raised her rifle in one smooth motion, aimed it at the leader's chest. "You want my husband, you go through me first." The men laughed, but there was uncertainty in it. A woman with a rifle and a baby on her back, standing alone against 6 armed men. It should have been ridiculous. But something in Clara's eyes, something in the way she held the gun, made them hesitate. "Ma'am, you don't want to do this," one of the younger men said. "Put the gun down before someone gets hurt." "The only person getting hurt is whoever draws on me first." Clara's voice was ice. "You think I'm bluffing? I survived the Lawton Stage massacre. I stared down Lucas Garrett while he threatened to burn my world. You think 6 outlaws looking for revenge scare me?" The leader's expression darkened. "You got spirit, I'll give you that. But spirit don't stop bullets." "Neither does stupidity, but you seem determined to test it." Clara took a step forward, and the men actually backed their horses up slightly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around and ride out of here, and if you ever come back, if you ever threaten my family again, I won't give you a warning. I'll just shoot." "You can't kill all of us," the leader said, but there was doubt in his voice now. "Maybe not, but I'll kill you first, and your boys will have to explain to your widow how their leader got shot by a farmer's wife because he was too stupid to walk away." Clara cocked the rifle. "Last chance. Ride out or find out." For a long moment, nobody moved. Clara could feel Hope squirming against her back, awake now and making small noises of distress. Her arms were starting to shake from holding the rifle steady, but she didn't lower it, didn't blink. Then the sound of more horses approaching, lots of them. Clara's heart soared as she recognized James in the lead, Samuel and 4 other men from town riding hard behind him. They'd seen the strangers heading toward Clara's property and came running. James pulled up between Clara and the outlaws, his own rifle already drawn. "She told you to leave. I suggest you listen." The leader's face twisted with rage as he recognized James. "Maddox, finally!" "Danny Reeves was your brother?" James's voice was calm. "Then you know he was robbing a bank. Know he pointed his gun at a pregnant woman and her child. I gave him a chance to drop his weapon. He chose to fire instead. That's a lie. It's witnessed fact. There were 20 people in that bank. All of them testified the same." James's gaze was steady. "Your brother made his choice. Don't make the same mistake." "You killed him!" The leader's voice broke, and Clara saw grief beneath the rage. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about a brother unable to accept that his sibling had been in the wrong. "I did," James acknowledged, "and I'm sorry for your loss. But he would have killed innocent people if I hadn't stopped him. I won't apologize for saving lives. He was family. The words were anguished. I know. James's voice softened slightly. I know what it's like to lose someone, to want someone to blame. But this path you're on, it only leads to more death, more grieving families, more brothers looking for revenge. He paused. Danny's been gone 4 years. You've spent 4 years consumed by this. Don't waste the rest of your life on it too. The leader stared at James for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. Clara held her breath, aware that they were balanced on a knife's edge between violence and peace. Then the man's shoulders slumped. I'm tired, he said quietly. So damn tired of hating, of hunting, of trying to make sense of senseless things. Then stop, James said simply. Go home. Remember your brother as he was before things went wrong. Let the rest go. Just like that? You kill my brother and I'm supposed to just forgive you? No. James lowered his rifle slightly. You don't have to forgive me, but you do have to let it go, because the alternative is I kill you today in front of my wife and daughter, and then maybe you have a son who'll come for me in another 4 years. Where does it end? The question hung in the air. Clara watched the leader struggle with it, watched him look at his men, at the armed townspeople, at her standing with her baby and her rifle. Watched him calculate the cost of revenge against the weight of 4 years' exhaustion. We're leaving, he said finally. Not because I forgive you, not because I think you were right, but because I'm done letting Danny's ghost run my life. He wheeled his horse and rode away, his men following. They disappeared into the distance, and this time Clara believed they wouldn't be back. There had been a finality in the leader's voice, a bone-deep weariness that spoke of surrender rather than retreat. James dismounted and was at Clara's side in seconds, gently taking the rifle from her shaking hands. Are you all right? Fine. We're fine. Clara turned so he could see Hope, awake and fussing. She's hungry, and I need to sit down before I fall down, but we're fine. James pulled them both into his arms, his embrace almost crushing. When I saw those men heading this direction, his voice broke. I've never been so scared in my life. They were scared of me, Clara said with a shaky laugh. Can you believe that? 6 armed outlaws scared of one woman with a rifle. I believe it. James pulled back enough to look at her face. You're the bravest person I know, the strongest. But Clara, you can't... He stopped, seemed to reconsider. You did what you had to do. You protected our daughter. I'm proud of you. But, Clara heard the unspoken word, but it terrifies me. Every time I leave, every time I ride patrol, I worry about what might happen while I'm gone. James's expression was tortured. Maybe I should resign, give up the badge, just be here to protect you. No. Clara's voice was firm. We're not living like that. We're not going to let fear dictate our choices. She touched his face. This won't keep happening, James. Eventually, all the ghosts from your past will be laid to rest. And when they are, we'll have helped build something better. How are you so certain? Because I have to be. Clara smiled wearily. Because if I let myself think about all the ways this could go wrong, I'd never get out of bed. So I choose to believe in better things, in progress, in the possibility that someday violence won't be the answer to everything. Samuel cleared his throat, reminding them they had an audience. We should establish regular patrols of the outer properties. Make sure no one else tries this. Agreed. James straightened, martial mode sliding over him like a coat. 3-man teams, rotating schedule. I'll organize it tonight at the town meeting. They spent the rest of the day in preparation and planning. Martha came to sit with Clara while James met with the men, and between them they worked out a system of signals, gunshots in specific patterns, that would bring help if needed. This is exhausting, Clara said as Hope finally nursed and fell asleep. Constantly preparing for the next attack. I thought it would end with Lucas. It will end, Martha said with confidence. Word spreading about James, about how he's fair but implacable, about how this town protects its own. Eventually, the troublemakers will learn to stay away. Eventually, Clara looked down at her sleeping daughter. I just want her to grow up safe, to not know this constant fear. She will. You're building that for her.
You and James both. Martha squeezed Clara's hand. Have faith. Clara tried. Over the next months, as winter deepened and then broke into spring again, she tried to have faith. And slowly, so slowly, she almost didn't notice at first, things did change. James's reputation grew. Stories spread about the deputy marshal of Crimson Ridge who'd faced down outlaws and corruption with equal determination.
More importantly, stories spread about the town itself, how its people stood together, how they protected each other, how violence wasn't tolerated. Other towns started asking for James's help establishing their own law enforcement. He spent a week in Red Fork, another in Lawton, teaching local men how to organize watches and patrols, how to build systems that didn't depend on one hero, but on community cooperation. The Oklahoma Territory was changing, slowly evolving from a lawless frontier into something more civilized. It wasn't perfect. Violence still erupted sometimes. Injustice still occurred. But there was progress. Real, measurable progress toward a society where law meant something. Clara saw it in small ways. The new school that opened in Crimson Ridge with a real teacher from back east. The telegraph line that finally reached them, connecting them to the wider world. The families moving in, building homes, planting roots instead of just passing through. Hope's first birthday was celebrated with the whole town, a party in the churchyard with more cake than 20 children could possibly eat. Clara watched her daughter toddle between people's legs, fearless and laughing, and felt her heart swell. This was what they'd fought for. Not just survival, but joy. Not just existence, but life worth living. James appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. What are you thinking? That I'm happy. Clara leaned into him. Deliriously, impossibly happy. Even with all the hard parts, even with the fear and uncertainty, I'm happy. So am I. James kissed the top of her head. You know what tomorrow is? Tuesday? Smart Alec. He smiled. It's the 2-year anniversary of the day I stepped off that stagecoach and saw you standing on your porch. 2 years. It felt like a lifetime and no time at all. Clara thought about that day, about her shock and fear, about believing James couldn't be her mail-order husband. I was so wrong, she said softly. About what? About you, about us. Clara turned to look up at him. I thought you were the wrong man, the wrong answer to my advertisement. But you were exactly right. You were what I needed, even if I didn't know it yet. You were what I needed too. James's expression was tender. A reason to stop running. A reason to believe I could be more than my past. They stood together, watching their daughter play, watching their community celebrate, feeling the weight of everything they'd survived and overcome. Deputy Maddox? A young man approached nervously. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in town. A couple of drifters causing trouble at the hotel. James sighed, but he was already moving toward his horse. Never ends, does it? Go, Clara said. We'll be fine here. She meant it. She was fine, surrounded by friends and family, her daughter safe and happy. James would handle whatever trouble had arisen just as he always did. And he'd come home tonight, just as he'd promised. That was the rhythm of their life now, work and danger and quiet moments of peace, strung together like beads on a string. It wasn't the safe, simple life Clara had imagined when she'd placed that advertisement. It was harder, more complicated, full of challenges she'd never anticipated. But it was also richer, fuller, more meaningful than anything she'd dared hope for. The months continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and small victories. A harsh winter tested everyone's endurance, but the community pulled together, sharing resources and supporting those who struggled. Spring brought floods that damaged several properties, but again, neighbors helped neighbors rebuild. Through it all, James served as deputy marshal with quiet competence. He broke up fights and arrested thieves and mediated disputes with Solomon-like wisdom. And every night, he came home to Clara and Hope, hung up his badge, and became just a husband and father. Clara's garden flourished. The wheat came in strong 2 years running, Bessie had a calf, and the chickens multiplied until they had more eggs than one family could eat. They were prospering in the way frontier families measured prosperity. Not in money, but in stability and sufficiency. On Hope's second birthday, Clara realized she was pregnant again.
She told James that night after Hope was asleep, watching his face transform from surprise to joy to a fierce protectiveness that made her laugh. "Another one," he breathed, his hand spreading over her still flat stomach. "Another child. Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. James pulled her close. Terrified, thrilled, overwhelmed, but yes, deeply happy. "Good." Clara kissed him. "Because I'm not doing this alone." "Never alone," he promised. "Not ever again." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in early winter Clara gave birth to a son they named Henry, after her first husband. James held no jealousy about the name. He understood that honoring the past didn't diminish the present. With 2 children, life became even fuller and more chaotic. James resigned as deputy marshal, or rather, transitioned to an advisory role that let him be home more often. A younger man named Tom Patterson, the doctor's son, took over day-to-day law enforcement duties, with James available for serious situations. It was the right decision. Clara needed him home, needed his help with 2 babies under 3 years old, and James seemed to relish it, approaching fatherhood with the same intensity he'd brought to everything else. "I miss so much with my own father," he told Clara one night as he rocked Henry to sleep. "He died when I was young, and I always wished I'd had more time with him. I won't make the same mistake. I'm going to be here for every moment I can." And he was. James was there for Hope's first words and Henry's first smile. There for the midnight feedings and the endless diaper changes and the toddler tantrums. There in ways Clara's own father had never been, partnering in parenthood instead of just providing. Their home was loud and messy and full of love. Martha and Samuel were adopted grandparents, spoiling the children shamelessly. Reverend Thompson baptized both babies. The whole community embraced the growing Maddox family as their own. Years passed. Hope started school, bright and fearless like her mother. Henry proved quieter but equally stubborn. Clara and James added a 3rd child, another daughter they named Martha, to their friends' tearful delight, and their cabin had to be expanded to accommodate everyone. The Oklahoma Territory changed too. The land rush brought thousands of new settlers. Towns grew into small cities. The railroad arrived, connecting them to markets back east. Violence didn't disappear, but it became less common, less accepted. Law and order took root and held. James's past faded into legend. Oh, some folks still told stories about the gunfighter who'd become a lawman, about the duels and the revenge seekers, but newer stories replaced them. Stories about Deputy Maddox's fairness, about the community he'd helped build, about the family he'd raised. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James and Clara stood on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Their children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The barn stood solid and strong. The fields were golden with wheat ready for harvest. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked suddenly. "Answering my advertisement? Coming here?" James looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Regret this? Regret you?" He gestured to encompass everything, the children, the home, the life they'd built. "Clara, answering that advertisement was the smartest thing I ever did. Coming here, finding you, it saved me in every way a person can be saved. Even with all the trouble? All the danger? Especially with that." James pulled her close. "The trouble proved what we were capable of, proved we could survive anything as long as we faced it together." Clara rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. They had survived everything, outlaws and vengeance and the weight of the past. They'd survived because they'd chosen each other day after day, through fear and doubt and impossible odds. "I love you," she said. "More now than the day we married, more than I thought possible." "I love you too." James kissed her temple. "More than my own life. More than anything." They stood together as the sun sank lower, painting their world in glory. Hope called out that dinner was ready, and Henry was chasing Martha around the yard, and inside their home the table was set and waiting. This was what they'd fought for, what they'd survived for. Not just the absence of danger, but the presence of joy. Not just survival, but a life worth living. Clara thought back to that day on the porch,
to seeing James step down from the stagecoach and thinking he couldn't be her mail-order husband, thinking fate was playing a cruel joke. But fate hadn't been cruel at all. Fate had been kind beyond measure, because James Maddox was exactly what she'd needed, even if she hadn't known how to ask for it. He was her partner, her protector, her love. He was the father of her children and the builder of her dreams. He was home. And as they walked inside together, James's arm around her waist and their children's voices raised in greeting, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't change a single moment of their story. Not the fear or the pain or the impossible choices, because all of it, every trial and triumph, had led them here, to this moment, to this life, to this fierce, beautiful, hard-won happiness that she would defend with her last breath. The door closed behind them, shutting out the darkness, holding in the light. And in the warmth of their home, surrounded by laughter and love, Clara Maddox, once Clara Reeves, once a widow waiting on a porch for a stranger, finally understood what it meant to be completely, utterly whole. She'd thought she was advertising for a husband. Instead, she'd found salvation. She'd thought she was offering shelter to a man on the run. Instead, she'd discovered a partner for the journey. She'd thought he couldn't be her mail-order husband, but he'd become so much more. He'd become her home, her heart, her future. And that was worth everything they'd endured to claim it. Outside, the stars came out one by one, ancient witnesses to human hopes and dreams. The frontier was growing tame, but it would never be completely civilized. There would always be challenges, always be struggles. But there would also be this: families gathering for dinner, children laughing in the yard, couples standing together against whatever came next. There would be community and connection and the stubborn human refusal to let darkness win. Clara's story was just one among thousands, one small tale of survival and love in a land being born. But it was her story, hers and James's, and it was glorious in its complexity and beauty. They'd started with lies and fear and death at their heels. They'd built truth and courage and life worth defending. And if that wasn't a happy ending, then happy endings didn't exist. But Clara believed they did. Believed in them with the fierce faith of someone who'd lived through hell and found heaven on the other side. Believed that every hard thing they'd faced had been worth it for moments like this. Ordinary, precious moments of family and peace. The mail-order husband who couldn't be hers had become everything she'd never dared dream of. And she would spend the rest of her days grateful beyond measure that fate had seen fit to deliver him to her door. Because sometimes the wrong answer turns out to be exactly right. Sometimes the impossible becomes inevitable. And sometimes when you least expect it, a stranger steps off a stagecoach and changes your entire world. Clara had been waiting for a husband. What she'd gotten was a miracle, and she wouldn't trade it for anything.